Howdy. Friday night, who needs a drink? Live stream, not normal content, just a live stream, not normal content, just a live stream. Dun, 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 dun. Yes. How's everybody doing? What is going on? There's Floppy Hand. People were asking about Floppy Hand. Can't really show you. It's a thing I used to do as a kid, and it featured in that video the other day, which is an old video, but I reposted it because someone asked me some comment from some video saying, does anybody know where to find the... So I saw it, and I was like, I'll send them the link. And so I went back and found it, and I was watching it, and I was like, God, that was really funny, that video. It didn't get near enough attention. Floppy Hand is in there. I don't know how, but when I was a kid, actually, I do know how. Our bedroom was very, very cold when we were kids, getting up and going to school. It was an ice box. We had an attic room, myself and my brother. Man, that was an ice box in the morning. You could see your breath. And as a way of kind of warming up, I'd just kind of do that frantically. And then I eventually started getting this floppy finger thing. And then I'd be in school, I'd cover most of it like this, and I'd hold it like that. And I'd go up to students and go, look at this fake rubber hand I found. And people would be like, oh my God, and they start grabbing it. And then, of course, I'd claw them, and they'd be like, oh my God, that was fake. Floppy Hands video. It's so funny because it was a really bizarre way to work Floppy Hand. The weirdest thing, like how on earth would Floppy Hand ever make it to the internet? But it just happened to work and for that video. But I can't do it with the left hand. My left hand is, oh, by the way, no date sub tonight. I might switch out though, because I put my AP on the gray strap and I'm excited. You know, when you just switch straps, it's like getting a new watch. I can't do it with my left hand. I can only do it with my right. And this goes to show that your siblings always pass you by. Always outdo you. Excuse me. Because my daughter can do both hands equally. We do floppy hands sometimes. Sometimes she asks me, like, hey, Dad, can I put on some music, or is it okay if I make some coffee? And I just kind of go, instead of a yes or a no. Just like, why do you think you need to ask me? You could ask me for my liver, or for my heart, and I'd give it to you. Any fathers in the audience? You'd do that, right? If one of your kids was ill and needed an essential, a heart transplant, and yeah, you just do it, right? You'd have one last hoo-ha, you'd have a great bottle of whiskey or something, and say goodbye to all your friends, and then do it. You wouldn't even think about it as a father. You'd be like, okay, well, I had a good run. It's the only kind of fatality, I think, that I can think of that would be welcomed, wholeheartedly. Right? Right. Gabri, hi friends. Happy Friday night. Is it happy? I suppose it is. It's Friday night. It's fine. It's fine. been a sad week. That crash there in DC was really heartbreaking. And then Bumpty Dumpty and his stupid comments were even worse. Still pulling bodies out of the water, and he's there going on about fucking DEI with no evidence whatsoever. I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing my best to ignore this prick. But that's really hard in moments like that. I put a thing on my Instagram earlier. Apparently, champagne sales have been down lately because people have nothing to celebrate. I don't know if that's true, but I posted it anyway. It has the music, the Tears for Fears song that was remade then. All around me are familiar faces. That song. It's a mad world. It's a real sad song. No Date Sub is perfect. Yeah. I mean, listen, it might be the greatest watch ever made. Fucking No Date Sub. How could you get any better? Rufus TPG sentenced. Yeah, I made it. I put that in my title last week, and I have to apologize because he wasn't quite sentenced. His lawyer had made a plea, for a certain amount, like a certain sentencing. So it was almost a sentencing, but not technically a sentencing. So I jumped the gun there. Today was the day, correct? Rufus, what have you found out? I wasn't paying attention, honestly. I've been working. I've been trying to get videos done. And then I took a nap. You can probably tell I'm a little bit. I just got up like half an hour ago. Patricia, I agree. Trump has been irresponsible. He hasn't been. Oh no, he's doing he's doing what he said he would do. That's the thing. I'm going to set the house on fire. Okay. Then he gets in and start setting the house on fire. Don't be shocked. He's at least doing what he said he would do. I'm going to have John on later. John. It's not his real name. Still works for the federal government. He received that funny letter, that famous letter everybody's talking about. The email, at least. I say letter. I have an old-fashioned way of saying things sometimes. The email, hey, you can, if you quit now, we'll pay you till September or whatever it was. But then I don't think it applies to him in the end. But he got the email anyway, and they're kind of, it's all messy. So I want to hear what he has to say about that, because he's he's going to do work with a helmet on every day. So he's going to talk about that and what's going on with Border Patrol. And if that sounds gloomy and boring, it won't be, because he's a very engaging and articulate individual. I think you'll all agree. So it can be very informative. We might talk about the plane crash as well. I mean, not that either of us are experts, but I actually spoke to an expert. As you guys know, I flew jump seats to New York at the end of last year, and I reached out to my good friend who was sitting in front of me flying the plane, and I said, hey, would you be interested in coming on talking about this stuff? But he very rightly said, very correctly, I think, very justly said, it's too soon and it would be disrespectful. And I thought, absolutely. Understood. Well, we did speak privately, the two of us. But he said, anytime you want me on, if you need to know about any aviation stuff, he's a wonderful teacher. He's when I was flying that time with him, he didn't just say, hey man, come on up. Like, we met earlier He actually picked me up at my house, which was really nice of him because he had to drive there anyway. And I was kind of on the way because I was staying with my mom, and she's not that far from the airport. When I was a kid, I used to climb out the aforementioned attic bedroom window, and sit on the roof with my old friend and watch the planes land, or at least the planes approach. It wasn't close enough to see them land. But anyway, he picked me up, and the lesson started there. It was really nice. He didn't have to do any of this, but he was, filling me in on everything that's happening. He had his iPad there with him at all times, getting updates on the flight that we're taking and, what track we're being given. There, it's like a highway, a lane and a highway across the Atlantic Ocean. The wind speed, possible areas of turbulence, and he'd show me and explain how it all works. Like he walked me through every single part of it. Apart from the exhilarating experience, it was very, very educational. And I'm already a bit of a nerd with that stuff as it is. I'm not a complete newbie to that whole thing. I'm by no means a fucking pilot. I'm nowhere close to it. But I know a few things, I know what a fucking rudder is, It's like there's a giant step between being completely clueless and then knowing, a few things. Anyway, so it was great for a dude like me because I wasn't just like the whole time going, huh? Huh? Meaning? Huh? I was like, oh, that's what that is. Okay, great. And et cetera, et cetera. But so we did talk about it, and yeah, I mean, I can see his point. Like, for a commercial pilot who flies heavy aircraft on a regular basis, it would be a little bit tone deaf to come straight on a show. It would have been amazing information, and he's really articulate himself also, but you gotta hand it to him. That's respectful. Patricia blaming DI and speculating about causes of the crash. Way too early, ignorant comments. Listen, there might be a reason for it. I was mad as hell when I heard him say that. I've been trying. I vowed to kind of try to ignore this whole next 4 years and stick my head in the sand. Wake me up in 4 years. If he stops in 4 years, which I highly doubt, I don't think he has any intention of doing so. But this one hurt because I was like, Jesus, like, these are, show some bloody respect. And show some respect for the people of the military and the aviation industry. These are professionals. These are people who work around the clock. But no, they're just going to sit some person at the controls of a Black Hawk helicopter who's not qualified just because they are the Black, Eurasian, or a woman. Give me a break. So you clearly think the military is a complete sham. That's nice. You really like America, don't you? Piece of shit. Then again, he did give us a clue, didn't he? He said, make America great again. So he doesn't consider it great now. So we should have known. He clearly thinks it's a fucking shithole and has no respect for the good men and women working in both of those sectors. I'll say plenty of things, be very critical about any country, not just America, but plenty of countries around the world. But when it comes to certain things, just be a little bit fucking more tasteful and show a little more class. But there may be more info coming in because it seems that he did a lot of firing in the FAA and Aviation Safety Advisory Committee, et cetera, in the past week. So that may have been his deflection. He's like, shit, I fired all these people. Not that it was necessarily directly, but it's bad optics. I better go out and distract everyone with a DEI argument. Bloody awful. Alpha Foxtrot 10 Canadian. Sad week for the aviation community. There's been an air traffic control crisis for years in the USA. Well, it's a difficult job to get. You need a lot of training. All started when Reagan fired 11,000 air traffic controllers who were striking in the 1980s to get better salaries and conditions. Yeah, they don't like those unions in the States, do they? They see them as a hindrance. Don't get me started. Yeah, rough stuff. It's coming out now. We don't know. It's all very early, but it's coming out that maybe one guy was doing two people's jobs, stuff like that. That's rough. But yeah, sorry. Let me move over to the next one. Thank you for that, Alpha Foxtrot. You're right, and that's great info. Carlos Ramirez, $5. Cheers, Oshin. Great to see John back. Yeah, did you guys miss him? He's good, right? I'll just get you guys warmed up. We'll talk about a few things and see what you guys are drinking, smoking, and what you have on this evening. And then we'll have the main man on. I actually was trying to get a hold of my other friend who is actually a helo pilot in the military. No better guest could have ever come onto a show. Sweetest guy on earth, but he was here in Venice, and I helped him get his Panerai and stuff, and then we'd always chat, and whenever there was a funny plane in the sky going around here, I'd always try and get a snapshot of it and go, the fuck are they doing? And he has all his maps and all this shit of who's in the air, and he's like, oh, that's they're measuring magnetism, and I'm like, what? Is that a thing? Like, yeah, magnetism changes in different areas. These are great friends to have. Honestly, I highly recommend you have friends in law enforcement and possibly government, possibly military, because you learn a fucking lot, and it's very humbling. And also in the medical industry, I highly recommend that too, because that'll humble the shit out of you. There's no coming back from that shit. You realize how little we all know. As his voice just began to break and turn into possibly the next command over the health industry in the United States, a guy with no medical degree or anything, a conspiracy theorist. Wow. Anyway, there's so much to be upset over, and this is why we drink and smoke cigars. What am I going to smoke? Anyway, I reached out to my friend who, he's a helo pilot. He actually liaisons here with the Italian military. I also know a helo pilot here, right here in Veneto, but I haven't spoken to him in ages. And he just flies people to hospitals, when people like break their back in the mountains skiing or whatever, he flies them down to hospitals. That's his job. But my other buddy, I realized all the communications between us were through Instagram, and my Instagram changed a couple of months ago. So I was trying to get a hold of him, but this is one of the problems when that happens. People don't know you're trying to get a hold of them unless they go into their message requests by some miracle. But maybe he would have said the same thing as my other friend. Like, we lost some of our own. It's a time for silence, not a time for speculation. And if that were the case, of course, I would have respected that. So I'm going to have a Partagas. This is the Millefleur, the limited edition. They're nice. They're about a 35-minute smoke, 40-minute smoke. And as backup, I have a Romeo and Julieta. Is there anybody smoking anything? Gubbery 100 Arab Emirates. Thank you so much, man. Glass is half full always. Till we all die. Be glad you have the glass. I'm not a pessimist. I'm not. Consider myself kind of I don't know, a bit of both probably. Patricia says I'll be heading southern Texas soon, and we'll go into Progreso, Mexico. The border agents do a great job there. Of course they do. Of course they do. Oh, man. It just annoys me when, I don't know why. Maybe it's in my old age. I just like people who in the medical doctors, firefighters, even police officers. I know there are some bad apples in there, and some of them just lose their shit because they're just dealing with the worst 1% of the population every day of their lives. It's got to be a fucking depressing job. No wonder that classic trope of the cops picking up, a dozen donuts is there because, you can't drink on the job. So imagine how fucking depressing a job that must be. Just dealing with every asshole every day. And especially in the United States, also fearing for your life because a lot of these assholes are fucking armed. Walk up to a car and say, "Hi, can I have your license and registration, please?" And they blow your head off. That's fun. Etc., etc. You know where I'm going. Someone's having duck horns. Simon, isn't that funny? My senses spot the word from across, from 3 feet across. That's so bad. It's not even a super chat. I'm like, duck horn, poof. Duck horn tonight. You having Merlot or Cabernet? You having 3 Palms or something else? That's good. That's exactly what I needed. Valve, he and Reagan fired a ton of controllers. Why would you do that? I mean, why? I don't understand. Oh, yes. Photo day, Jax. Do you smoke after sex? I don't know. I've never looked. Julio is having a Dalmore 12. That's nice. I keep seeing Glenmorangie ads on my feed with Harrison Ford. You guys drink Glenmorangie? I don't think I've had a Glenmorangie in years. I should go and get a bottle at some point. Speaking of drinking, this Sunday night we'll be doing our cocktail night again on Tim Wright's channel. You guys should tune in. It's a lot of fun. You can learn a lot. Last Sunday was James Bond night, martinis, shaken not stirred, the Vesper martini, and I learned a new thing called the perfect martini. Never had one before, and I love it. So you guys should tune in because there's a lot of info, a lot of great info and history. It's a wonderful show. It's one of my favorites. Sunday night on the Tim Wright channel. Brian Alive. Hello, Ashina. Have a good evening. Thank you, sir. I'm getting a Seiko King Samurai Shuiro in the next days. That's a great watch, man. That is a that's a really interesting, cool looking watch. Very happy with that. Very rare and beautiful piece. They're very hard to get. I was lucky. I was lucky because I've got a guy in Vicenza, a different town where I started the channel, and he's got a Seiko dealership. And no matter how rare and new it is, he always gives me a discount, which is great. He's a funny guy. He's a big cigar smoker as well, Toscanos mainly, and funny dude. When he sold me one of my first Speedmasters years ago, maybe my very first Speedy, yeah. And it was new in the box and everything, and he gave me a great deal. And he's like, "Do you want me to size it for you?" Blah blah blah. I'm doing all this. He's putting it on. I'm like, and he goes, it's a classic, and if you ever want to sell it, you get out of it, you get your money back. What's to lose? Blah blah blah. All that stuff. And I was still learning at the time. And he looks at me and he goes, "Meanwhile, do you even believe they landed on the moon?" I don't believe it. I was like, "You're selling me the watch." But anyway, yeah, he sold me this Shuiro. Speaking of sales, there's one thing that came to mind, because I'm always looking for metaphors and parallels, you know me. And there's one thing I noticed about Bumpty Dumpty, right? Is, he won. He won fair and square. He's the president, and it's green lights ahead of him now. He's got everyone on his side pretty much. There's no need to tell us what the Dems would have done. There's no need to keep selling himself. It's a weird thing. Does anybody else notice this? Because I thought of a parallel, speaking of sales. I used to work in a guitar store in Dublin. There was a whole segment on that and that area in the Ireland Part 1 video, but that got chopped. It wound up on the cutting room floor with a handful of other scenes, unfortunately, because the video was just too long. Maybe I'll post it for the members or whatever, but working away in this guitar store, I must have been 18 years old. And so we're all salesmen, I mean, I was there polishing guitars and tuning them. But then, someone comes in and you have to stand there and give them the best advice and show them which guitar. And, they want to buy a guitar for their son. That was a big one, right? "Hi, it's my son's birthday next week, and I think he wants to learn guitar, so I want to buy a guitar and an amplifier. Which one would you recommend?" So you have to be like, well, listen, don't spend too much because maybe you'll never really pick it up, and don't spend too little, blah, blah, blah. You have to do the whole sales thing. And one of the guys, he's a manager there. He's a bit of a kind of a tormented soul. He went from being the nicest guy in the world to the most horrible guy in the world. I believe he was addicted to weed, because later in life I got to know weed smokers very well. I don't smoke weed myself, never have. But I got to know some, and when they've had their smoke, they are the most chilled and lovely people. But when they don't have their smoke, man, they turn into fucking vampires with zero patience. Everything irritates them, I have detailed files, unfortunately. But this guy, I believe he had that problem. But anyway, he was cool. Once he had a smoke, he was fine. So anyway, he would do a lot of the sales. And one thing always confused me about this guy is that after he made the sale, he'd continue selling. So like he'd be, oh yeah, I should get this guitar, and what age is your son? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, it'll be perfect. Blah, blah, blah. This is the best value in the business. Doing the whole sales thing, right? It's a little creepy, but, it's the world. And then the person would say, because we'd be sitting there, behind the counter, we'd overhear everything, That's how you learn how to sell, is by hearing other people do it. And once a person was like, okay, great, I'll take that one. Thanks. And he'd walk him to the counter and we'd pull it out. At the time we had one of those slider machines for your credit card, like the old fashioned thing. God, I am old. Fuck. We'd pull out all the stuff and an invoice and, and usually throw in like an extra set of strings and a couple of picks and just like, throw in some goodies to make them feel good or whatever. But he would continue, he'd continue selling the guitar. He'd be like, and you'll know that you'll be able to get, a better deal later. You want to trade it in, blah, blah, blah. And, I bought one of these guitars myself years ago, and I'd always be saying, like, under my breath, like, shut up. The guy already said yes. Now just wrap it up. Change the subject. Change the air. Ask him, does he live in Dublin, or, does he have any other kids other than his son he's buying the guitar for, or whatever? Or did you see the game last night? Just stop selling it. He already said yes. You're continuing on with your sales stuff. If anything, now you run the risk of saying something that will turn the guy off and make him change his mind. Stop fucking talking. So that's what it rings of when I see Bumpty go up there. And he's like, and the Dems wouldn't have been able to do it. And I told you, and I was the only guy who was able to do it. And it's like, yeah, you don't need, like, you already won, dude. You don't need to tell us if the Dems were in power, they would have done it differently, or you're the only guy for the job. You literally are the only guy for the job, whether we like it or not. And a lot of us don't fucking like it. So start selling yourself to the American people. They bought the product. So all it seems like is an ego stroke. It seems like in his head there's a little ha 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 behind everything he said, or a nah 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 nah. That's what it seems like after everything he's fucking saying. Just like, mother of God. We have to sit through 4 years of this. I'm afraid we do. How much wine is there in the world? Lots. Can I have it all, please? Sure. I'm going to start doing Lenny now. The Meredith is in the room. What an unfortunate start to Sean Duffy's first day. Dealing with a crash like this is the last thing anyone would want. From reality TV to this kind of reality check, not exactly the smoothest career transition. Thank you, Meredith. Thank you for your enormous contribution. You and others make this whole thing worthwhile. Excuse me, on a Friday night. Thank you, sir. You're a gentleman. Anyway, just looking through the chatteroo here. Give us a thumbs up. I'm going to have to start asking, I'm going to have to start doing that in my regular videos. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Something I never liked, but there's a lot of folks that are giving thumbs down. Like I posted a video last week And people are like, that was one of your best videos ever. It was really educational, very interesting, thought provoking, and great insight on, why watch collecting is great and so on. But it just didn't get the views don't reflect that. And why? Because I went into behind the scenes in YouTube, and there's a lot of dislikes because there's a lot of, get off my lawn, commie kind of guys. And of course, I say certain things that are, I don't say enough bad shit about, socialism, communism for them to give them the sugar in the mouth they need, So there's a lot of downvotes because they're like, I like this channel, but America, they're these guys. They literally can't hear. I even say great things about capitalism. I actually kind of map it all out, that it's all Jesus. At the end, I even kind of get a little silly and funny. I go, whether it's the greedy capitalist or the filthy commie, I even say filthy capitalist, it's not enough for them. It's not enough for these guys. And so many people love the video. So I should have thought ahead and put in, like, if you like this video, even if you just found it interesting, maybe you don't agree with everything in there, but if you found it interesting, give me a thumbs up, to combat these knuckle draggers, So that's one thing I'm going to have to start doing. I fucking feel awful. I'll make a fanboy there. Thumbs up. Thank you, brother. Cigar type here. You're late. It's what is it? A Partagas Mille Fleurs. Limited edition Partagas. And I'm neglecting it slightly, which is always a good thing. I think, an amateur smoker when they smoke too fast. You got to pace it out. Really, cigars are built for, sipping on a nice rum or bourbon or whatever you want to pair with it, and having good conversation with other distinguished gentlemen or ladies, because that's the pacing of a cigar. You're supposed to be in the conversation, sipping away, and then you take a puff, and then you're back to and that makes the space between the puffs, it regulates it. You always know a new smoker, because they, there's too many puffs in too short a space, and then they start getting dizzy headed and they want to throw up and stuff like that. Got to be careful. Patrick Cullen, it's the 114060. It's not the new the 124060, which I really like. My brother has one of them. Looks great. Yeah, you like the good old no date. More watch than any man could ever want or need. Mind you, I do want to put on AP, the offshore, because I put it on the gray again. Here comes the gray again. And it always excites me to change out the colors. It's a subtle difference because the other one's green. But look, it's nice. Gray. This doesn't come with this watch. It comes with a black. And I convinced them at the boutique to swap it for a gray because I wasn't interested in the black. Boom. So I'm going to have John on in about 20 minutes. Before that, I want to talk to you guys about first steps. What are you talking about, Ush? What do you mean first steps? I was talking to a fellow YouTuber only last week, and they were mentioning that their sibling wanted to get into YouTube also. and they were saying, it'll be great because I'll be able to give them a head start. I've already got some subscribers and all of that, and I'll be able to kind of give them that extra shove at the start. And I said, listen, that's a huge thing. That's a huge thing in every aspect of life is those first steps, that first start. And it made me ponder, it made me reflect about exactly that. Because people starting YouTube or any social media trying, the difference between 0 subs and 100 subscribers is way bigger than the difference between 100 and 200, or the difference between 1,000 and 1,100. Those first steps, and like getting monetized, in order to get monetized on YouTube, you need, what was it, 4,000 hours of viewing or something? I can't remember. And a lot of people give up before they even get there, because it's a real struggle. And it just made me ponder about this stuff, because I see it everywhere in life. You want to go to the gym, you want to get in shape. The hardest part of that is the first weeks. I'm not saying that it's all easy sailing after that, but that first, if you can imagine it like a stairwell, like a big concrete stairs, like the Spanish steps in Rome or something, that first step is higher than your head. The other steps are big too, and they're hard to climb too. But that first one, there's a sea of individuals at the foot of that first step who never got up or looked at it and went, I can't do it. And it applies to literally everything in life. I'm often asked about the band. It was a rock band I was in for 25 years. And, oh, do you miss it? Do you have any regrets and so on? And I miss it. I miss hitting my bass and so on. Sure. But, I don't have any regrets at all, because the band did those first steps. And in life, I know I'm getting philosophical real quick here, but I have John coming on in a while and I want to get this stuff off my chest. In life, always, it's a huge achievement to make that first step. And I feel very lucky. I don't know if luck has anything to do with it, but I'll just say lucky. Cigar on my glasses. That I made some really big milestone first steps in my life. Like with the band, for example, I'll never forget getting to New York with my boys. One was my brother. The other was my cousin. The other was a friend from down the street. May as well have been a brother of sorts. So we're almost like a little family. And we're little Irish kids, in this big city. And we have to go have lunch with some record executive, And we go into a skyscraper. I've never been in a skyscraper in my life. I'm from fucking Dublin. We don't have skyscrapers in Dublin. And even coming over to Italy a little bit, there are no such things here. So next thing we're on the 60th floor of some building in Times Square. And we walk into this office and I can't remember which. It was Atlantic Records or Epic Records or Sony, or I can't remember, because we literally had lunch with them all. They were all thinking about signing us. And so you have to go. This is the way it works. They call you and they say, come to dinner, come to lunch, whatever. In the end, it's a fucking total waste of time, because we found out in the end that unless your lawyer calls you, there is no contract. They're just bringing you out to spend their budget for the year and to feel you out and at least say that they met with you, so their boss doesn't give out to them when they hear that you signed with someone else or whatever. But at the time, we didn't know any of this stuff. We were super wet around the ears. And we walked in, and there's a lady at a desk, and it's a big room, office building, there's glass everywhere. And there's like golden records and platinum records all along the hallways and the walls and everything. And we're like, hi, we're Mr. North, and we're here to meet such and such. I can't remember who it was. And she's like, oh yeah, hi guys, just take a seat in there. Wait, he'll be out in just a moment. And we sat down, and it was, the view out the window was like all, Manhattan and all these gold records on the walls and stuff. And it was super new to us. And we had played a million gigs. We'd played Dublin for years. We'd played Italy for years. We'd fucking gigged our asses off in nightclubs, playing fucking YouTube covers and shit forever and ever and ever. And finally here we are. We're in New York in a record label office. I remember looking at the guys and going, guys, if this is as far as we get, fucking great, Now, of course, nobody would have been happy because we had our sights set on the sky, wanted to be the biggest band in the world, blah, 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 like every band. But I had these moments every now and then of just reflection going, if this is as far as we got so much farther than so many musicians and artists and songwriters. So many. I know so many incredibly talented people from back home in Dublin and even here in Italy who never saw the inside of a record label, who were never signed, who were never even got close to that. Especially not a major record label. We were signed to RCA Records. Fucking Elvis is on that. It's like one of the big ones. So I was thinking, like, even if it doesn't go any farther than this, like, what we've accomplished is huge. Just even to get to this point. And it's true. Having that conversation last week, there was a couple of YouTubers, I'm not going to mention names, but two of them I've significantly helped out get past that first step in YouTube. And luckily they recognize that, because it's like, wow, I didn't have to deal with that big sea of shit there at the very bottom, that very first thing. I got to the second step real quick. Now it's still hard, and it's still a journey, and it's still a struggle. But man, oh man, that first one is demoralizing and crippling. And I kind of thought, we got offline, we were talking, and then we got off, and I thought to myself, I didn't have any help. I did the first step. No one gave me a hand. No one gave me a shout out on any channel. No one told their audience to sub to me. I had to sit out and do those 4,000 hours and do all of that shit and put the fucking labor in. And I realized, it was a kind of a moment of contentment, because I was like, you know what? There's another one I did. There's another first step, no matter where it goes later. There's another achievement of, like, you fucking put the work in and you did the thing. It's probably the same feeling as like somebody looking at their washboard abs in a gym in the mirror going, wow, 2 years ago, I was flabby and I just There's no easy way through this. You've just got to muscle down and do it. And it's the same with an instrument. You know how many guitars are sold? Speaking of selling the guitars in the store, how many guitars are sold that wind up gathering dust in the corner? It's probably 99 out of 100. I mean, selling instruments, musical instrument stores make a lot of money. It's a big, big business. In the United States, there's Sam Ash and there's Guitar Center. They're enormous. They're like airports, you know. Because the truth is, most people never get past that first. They never climb that first step. They try to learn a chord on the guitar and it hurts their fingers, and they get blisters on their fingers from practicing. And then it's just too painful to even try to make the chords. And then they're demoralized because they see some fucking 6-year-old kid on YouTube is like, you know, they're like, oh God, fuck. There's so many missiles that can fly into you in that first, getting past that first step. So if you can play a guitar at a party, you may not be accomplished like you play gigs or write songs or make records. Fine. If you can even get up at a fucking wedding and play an acoustic guitar with a few chords and sing a song, you've already accomplished something amazing. Because down at the bottom, there's just the sea of billions who just will never get to make that first step. So, it was just a thought. It was just like a reflection about life and the way it works. And try to be aware. No matter what you're doing, if you're picking up a new instrument, you're starting a new business, you want to get in and write, you think you might be a good writer, write poetry or novels. You know how many poems wind up in the trash can and crumpled paper? Thousands of your own. Or no matter what you want, or you want to hit the gym, or you want to learn how to cook, or you want to start YouTube. Just be ready. Yes, it's a long road to be successful in anything. But just keep in mind that what you're doing essentially is you're pulling yourself out of a sea of just everyone. That's what you're doing. It's that old imagery that I mentioned many months ago, or probably a year or two ago on the stream, is the crabs at the bottom of the pot when they're being boiled. They're all alive, and then one crab, they're all trying to get out, and one crab actually gets a grip at the edge of the pot and is actually pulling himself out. The other crabs see that and they grab him because they want to grab onto him and maybe get out too, but then they pull him, their weight pulls him back down. And that happens so much in life in so many ways, you know. Just getting out of your circumstances. For a lot of people, what that is getting out of their town that they're in. They're in some little shitty town, and the only job opportunities are, you know, join the military or work in a Dairy Queen, you know, serving ice cream, or work at the filling station. And they have dreams in their heads, and just getting out of that little town is going to be the hardest part. Just turning to their mother and father and saying, I'm moving to New York, I want to be an actor, or I'm going to work on Wall Street or so. It's just a huge, that first step is a monstrous, the most painful step of the whole lot, which is why most people never, ever do it. I think over the weekend, the Oscars are on, right? Is that this weekend or is it next weekend? There's a lot of controversy about it as well. That's different stuff. Maybe I'll talk about that with Dirk later. because that's more our thing. But there's a lot of scoffing I noticed in recent years. When I was growing up and you see the Oscars, you'd see fucking De Niro get up and take his Oscar or whatever, John Hurt or whatever. And you're like, oh my God, genius. But I've noticed in the past 10 or 15 years, and especially in the recent 5 or 6 years, a lot of scoffing at the people, at the celebrities, at the actors, at the directors, people going up and crying and thanking their mother and father and stuff. And there's been a wave, I think, in recent years of like, whatever, boo-hoo, you're rich, who gives a shit? Take your fucking award and go home. Or stop pretending like you cured cancer. You're just an actor. This kind of scoffing. And I understand where it's coming from. And I'm sure plenty of you in the audience are guilty of doing precisely that. But, unless they're Nepo babies, what you're looking at on that stage quite often, and especially in the group like best foreign language film and shit like that, and best cinematography, and these are people who started out with a dream and they wanted to do something that everyone else wants to do, or so many people want to do, and they faced failure and rejection, in some cases to a horrific degree. Like any actor you've ever seen has done like 12,000 auditions and been rejected. Rejection is the biggest part of the acting career until you finally get that part, if it happens, and then you get noticed for it, and then you start getting other parts, and hopefully it snowballs and turns into a big career. But the chances of that happening are so fucking slim, even if you're a great actor. Instead, most actors have to fucking wait tables and sleep on friends' couches and face rejection every single fucking day. Now we're sitting on our couch, oh yeah, whatever, they're vain, and they need their egos stroked, and so okay, maybe they have that issue, but like, I don't think most of us would have the fucking courage to do what a lot of these people have done. And when they finally wind up getting their Oscar, I think you need to remind yourself the journey they made, unless there's some fucking famous person's kid, okay? If it's Nepo baby, then we have less affection for them, because it's like, oh, you got your, a foot in the door. And what is the thing on the SNL? A foot in the door and so much more. Doesn't mean they haven't struggled, and it doesn't mean they're not talented, and it doesn't mean they don't put all of their energy into the role. They also have a different plight as well, and that's people looking down at them for having that foot in the door. So they have to combat that issue as well, which is why Nicolas Cage changed his name from Coppola, because he's related to Francis Ford Coppola. He changed it to Nick Cage because he didn't want that advantage. But in many, many cases, the people you see on that stage getting their Oscar have gone through the longest, ugliest, loneliest. There's a thing. It's a lonely trip. You get a job at your local office, or your local blah, 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 or whatever you're doing. It's kind of a relatively easy thing. You apply for the job. That's hard, and you hopefully get it. But then you're in with a lot of other people who are all did the same thing. You decide to fuck off to LA or New York or whatever. Here in Italy, it'd be Milan or Rome, and try and make a career out of art and expression. You've got no one's support. Like, even your family are going to have difficulty accepting that, because they'd be like, oh shit, can you finish the college degree so at least you have a safety net? All of this kind of stuff. Truth is, if you finish the college degree, you'll waste years that you could have used trying to go for aim for your dream. So you're kind of stuck between a few horrible options there. Every time I look at Lady Gaga, I'm like, I'm in awe of that woman. Lady Gaga is an astonishing woman. Never mind her music. If you care about her music or not, doesn't matter. That woman can play a lot of instruments. She writes all her stuff. She's an amazing singer. But she's really small. She's not very pretty. She's not. Just naturally not a pretty girl. Can you imagine the amount of rejection on the streets of New York City, going from club to club? There's early footage of her playing at the bitter end and stuff on Bleecker Street at a piano, out of tune piano, between one band and another, singing her heart out. And she was no one. She was absolutely no one. She was also sexually harassed by a few asshole producers. She won't say who it was, but apparently one guy at a record company said, take your clothes off. And she realized, if I do this, I'll probably get my foot through a door, but I'm not going to do it. That's just an astonishing journey she's made, Now, if she has a kid and that kid wants to sing, they'll have a foot in the door, right? They'll be a Nepo baby because their mom is Lady Gaga, so they'll get the fucking audition and they'll get the gig. And that's fine. And maybe they deserve it. Maybe they're amazingly talented too. But don't forget, Lady Gaga didn't have any help. And she had to do that first step all alone. And that's an astonishing accomplishment. I'll repeat to you guys. I know better musicians than me, way better songwriters that are still back in Dublin or even here in Italy. I know a few more talented, better players, better songwriters. And they could never get up over the top of that first step. They just never even got, they don't even know what it looks like up there, So you got to be happy with what you've achieved in life. Now, I know most of the audience know exactly what I'm talking about because most of my audience own nice watches. If you have a Rolex on your wrist, you've probably faced those steps. And the other thing, of course, is you might accomplish a certain amount and then pivot. You might fall down again and decide you want to start up a new ladder or a new set of stairs. And now you've got that whole new first step to do all over again. And by now you're 42 years old. It's like life is really fucking hard. And those first steps, especially that very first one, is so tall and so daunting for most. Most people give up. Piano lessons, that first lesson, most people never come back for the second. I want to learn French. I want to learn a new language. So many people never come back for the second lesson or the third. Guitar lessons, the guitar gets sold then on eBay. That's the common occurrence. The person who goes back for the second piano lesson and the third piano lesson and 3,000 piano lessons down the road, that's the exception to the rule. Anyway, just got off on a thought here. So let's talk about some stuff. My friend works for the federal government, as you know. His name cannot be revealed. Thanks again, Meredith, for that great super chat, man. He's a good friend and has some interesting information. And as far as I know, he received this infamous email to his job to consider retiring and gets 6 months severance pay or whatever from your new leader. Hey, John, how's it going, man?
Hey, I was almost hoping you'd forget about me and just keep going. I don't want to follow that. That was a great rant.
I get
Results
off
are
in a rant, don't
sexy.
I?
Yeah, results are sexy. The process is not.
Right? Didn't Woody Allen say that
Mhm.
that art is 90%? Sorry, 10% inspiration, 90%
Yeah, 90%
perspiration.
perspiration. That's right.
So how's it
Yeah,
going, man?
it's going. I was hoping you'd
Yeah.
leave the no date sub on because that's what I'm rocking. Because
So what you're
days,
rocking? Oh, you're no date.
well,
Yeah, I forgot you were no
yeah.
date.
Well, days don't matter anymore because it's just all one long ass day at this point. So I picked a
Right.
hell of a year to stop drinking.
You
Uh,
stopped drinking.
yeah, I mean, I was never really a heavy drinker or even a drinker. I'd have one or two here and there Friday nights or if I went out, but kind of started on, I would say January and just kind of was like not feeling doing it. So I figured if I didn't have a desire to do it, I wasn't going to find an excuse to do it. And
Hmm.
it's been working, but we'll see. We'll see. We'll see how long I last with that strategy.
I mean, what's
Yeah.
the issue? You're not a heavy drinker. You have a little bit of wine. That's it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think my wife said that there's a mentality called an upholder personality. So, like an
Hmm.
upholder personality is somebody that once they commit to something, they're just going to do it. They get locked into that.
Is that
And
you?
there's just,
I feel
yeah,
like that's you.
I think that's me. So it's like if somebody says, "Hey, you think this might be kind of difficult to just not drink?" I just go, "I'm just going to stop drinking and see if I can do it."
Mm.
And once I commit to doing it, I think I just stick with it. And I have a solution for your upvote problem.
Yes.
I think at the end of every video, you get Michaela and clip that at the end where Michaela says, "If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe and upvote." And
Ah,
then
yes.
and it's
Then
that
they'll be
visual
like,
yeah, it's a
yes.
distraction because then even if people were mad at you for what you just said or they, are like, "Ah, fuck that guy." They see that
Right.
at the end and they're like, "Oh, you know what? Yeah, okay. I'll do it for her."
That's
That
a
might
good
be a
plan.
listen, I mean, it's a psychological warfare plan, but it might work. And even though we're
Mm.
revealing it now, people will forget that this was the strategy all along, and they're still gonna go for it. Think about it. See, I can see the wheels are turning right now. You're thinking
The
about
wheels
it.
are always turning. They're always turning.
Yeah, the wheels are spinning right now. I think that might work.
So, unfortunately, we have to talk
I
about
know. We got some
stuff
dark
going
stuff.
on.
We'll try to keep it light.
You will keep it light. We won't get
And I'll
too
try to say
heavy.
something inflammatory towards the end so somebody sends a massive super chat and calls me a piece of shit.
Now you're
Hopefully.
you're loved with this
Fingers
crowd.
crossed.
I'm the one they
Yeah.
don't like. They tune in against their own better
Uh,
judgment. I think most cases. Um, the where to start? Oh my god! So you
right.
receive? Is it okay to talk about the email you received?
Yeah,
Your
every federal employee got it. All 2.3 million of us. There was
wow.
yeah, there was a new account started and they sent out a test message first and it was from it just says HR. That's the sub, the sender. And when I
Yeah.
first got the first test, it just said test email and I thought it was a scam. I'm like, oh,
Uh-huh.
this is one of those phishing things that we're supposed to report. And turns out it was legitimate. And then we got that fork in the road email. And I don't know if this is true, but apparently it's the same email that Elon sent out to Twitter employees when he took over. I think the
Uh.
title was the same. And it read like a very corporate language email. Government has its own kind of language and how they say things and how they, address topics. And the corporate world obviously has their own vernacular. And this read like a corporate email from an HR representative. And so I read through it. And again, to quote Brad Pitt, when a deal sounds too good to be true, it ain't. And
Right.
that's where my mind went. I'm like, wait, if we
Well, was it a
resign,
good deal? I
well,
mean, weren't they asking you essentially to consider resigning?
yeah. So I think what was happening is they were targeting people that were working from home. So there's
Oh,
certain jobs within the federal government that are remote. They can be 100% remote if the person has like a physical disability and they're, an IT person or something. They don't need to go into an office. And then after COVID, a lot of people went remote because they didn't want people going into the offices. And I think what they were trying to do since COVID kind of became less of an issue is get more and more people back into the office. But a lot of people didn't want to do it. So there was a lot of kind of back and forth. So I think what this was targeting was all those people that didn't want to return to the office and were holding these positions that were fairly well compensated. But again, every one of those executive orders that came out and this email said, if you're in the national security positions, if you're doing anything with immigration or enforcement related or armed forces, you're exempt. So this doesn't even apply to you. And so we got this email and everybody was scratching their heads. And then, our own individual departments started reaching out to us kind of, retroactively going, guys, this doesn't apply. Don't send anything. Don't reply to this. This doesn't apply to you because of where you're working. So,
okay.
But I don't know if anybody took them up on the deal, but then there's also obviously issues with funding because if you resign, you're not going to get paid. You're not supposed to. That's not how government appropriations work.
Okay.
So once you leave a government position, they're not going to pay you to stay home, just the way the funding strings work. So I'm not even sure if it's something that could be done. And apparently now there's kind of backroom talk about anybody that did accept this offer, is it even enforceable? So it's just a lot of confusion. When the boss kind of makes that decision. Again, it's like a CEO makes this crazy decision and pushes it down to everybody. And now the mid-level management is trying to figure out what the boss wants and how to actually implement the plan. And it's super confusing with the government because everything's on a, command structure and there's a chain of command and, those things are supposed to trickle down, not just from the top to the bottom. And then the middle has to react. So I think that's the chaos everybody's kind of, frustrated with right now.
Also, when Trump promises you'll get paid,
yeah,
I think that would have pinch of salt.
Yeah,
well.
I think
oh,
that
really?
one I
You're
was
going to
like,
get paid for 6 months? Doubt it.
Yeah, I was hesitant. That's the first thing that went through my mind. I was like, I don't know. This sounds too good to be true. So.
And what are you observing with all the ICE raids and the families getting pulled apart, torn apart, and so on, and deportations? How is that looking? Last time we spoke about Border Patrol and deportations, you were telling me that there was a huge increase in immigrants coming into the country in recent years, that the numbers were staggering.
Yeah, they've dropped a lot.
Do you think it did drop?
It dropped a lot. Yeah. I mean, almost. Okay. Yeah. It's like turning off a faucet almost. But.
So do you think it's because there's memes going around TikTok and stuff and people going, yeah, I got deported. I'll be back in a few days, because they're just like, you're not going to stop us. Like, we're like, we're coming back.
Yeah.
Do you think it's going to be an effective, do you think this is a problem that's fixable? So quite often I notice in life that, no matter where it is in the world or in life, that usually when there's a big issue, it just isn't it's not a fixable issue in most cases, like the LA fires. It's like, it's a hot place. It's a dry, arid place. And if a fire starts, it could easily, it's not something that's curable. There's no penicillin we can administer.
I'm glad you actually brought up fires. I know you're not a fan of analogies, so indulge me, but that's not your forte. No, fires are actually a perfect analogy for this because I think people misunderstand immigration as a solvable problem, and it's not. It's a problem that you have to kind of manage and mitigate. And it's like the thing you said about working out. If you start getting into fitness, you don't work out and then get to a certain point and go, okay, I'm done. I achieved it. Yeah. You have to maintain it. And immigration's the same way. If your country is, worth immigrating to, that's a good thing. So it's a tiered approach. You have to have a decent a decent border that's secured and manageable, and you know who's coming in and out. But you also don't want to turn the dial too far in the totalitarian direction. So you've got North Korea on one side of the dial, which is obviously almost impregnable. And then on the other
Yes.
side of the dial, you have Pakistan and Afghanistan, where people just come and go as they please.
Right.
So, as a
You want a
country,
nice balance between
you want it somewhere in the
Afghanistan and North
middle.
Korea.
Yeah, you want that dial somewhere in the middle, but you also want to be able to turn that dial as events change in the world. So if there is a humanitarian crisis somewhere and you decide, you know what, we're going to admit more people in right now because there's a tsunami that just hit, some poor island or some poor nation, or if there's a global event where terrorism is a threat, then you kind of turn that dial back into the security direction and go, you know what, we're going to be a little more hesitant to let people in right now. So that chaos is unfolding, but the numbers are significantly down because people are obviously reacting to it. And the free for all that was happening the last 6 years, I would say, they basically are like, shit, a new sheriff's in town and this guy's not playing. But the deportation's a second layer of it, because when you get encountered at the physical border by a border patrol agent or a customs officer, you're not actually deported. You're never really even allowed in. So you're just removed immediately back to Mexico if you're from Mexico or Canada. Or if you're from, South America, you get put on a plane and sent back. But if you're caught inside the US for the last, again, probably 3 administrations, they've prioritized violent offenders. So they weren't going around rounding people up, from taco stands and laundromats and all that stuff. But if you were arrested for a murder or a robbery and you also
Sure.
happened to be illegal, then ICE would get contacted. And then after you served your sentence, you would get deported, which I
Mm.
think is a sane policy. If we're willing to imprison our own citizens for those murders and robberies, we should probably, if we can get those people out of the country, to not reoffend and not put them back into the community, that's probably a sane, good thing. But the left kind of lost its mind when it came to that, because anything touching immigration, identity, race, all that stuff became so radioactive that left of center, if you even brought that up, you were accused of being a racist and a xenophobe and a bigot. So a lot of
Yeah.
these jurisdictions kind of said, you know what, we're not going to cooperate with ICE. So if we arrest somebody for raping a 12-year-old, we're just going to release them back into the community after they serve their sentence. And that's where that kind of, again, the insanity on that side is what got you, the reelection of Donald Trump, because people were just reacting to that in this last election, because they were just tired of the chaos that they were seeing in certain areas, and specifically in major cities.
Is it
So yeah.
overreach? Is that what they're doing right now? They're pushing back extra hard because of overreach in both directions. Like, I would say, if you
Yeah.
object to some violent criminal being deported who's also illegal, just because of the fact that they came from a poor country, it's kind of overreach. It's like, listen, he had his chance and he was violent and he
Yeah.
committed crimes. So, like, where's the balance? This is one thing I'm observing is always that issue where people may have good intentions or they may have certain ideas, but they just push it goddamn too far.
Yeah,
Like,
they
it
go too
just
far.
it just goes outside the border of reason completely. And then the people on the other side who they might be bigots, they might be racist,
Yeah.
get to say, you see
Yep.
what
Yep.
happens when we let this stuff, that
And
kind
that's
of
why you see Trump doing that right now, because he's, like you just mentioned, he's selling himself after we already purchased it, you know?
right.
But I think he's reinforcing that mantra of, he's not selling himself to prove how good he is. He's constantly reiterating how bad things could be if he wasn't there. So he's
Yeah.
reminding everybody, if the Democrats were in power, this would happen. Yeah, there is an overreaction to it to some extent, but again, to be pragmatic, I would say that, the United States does have an immigration policy and a law that says that if you enter the country illegally, that is a crime. Now, it's not the same level of severity as a murder, but it is technically a crime. And linguistically and rationally speaking, somebody who commits a crime is a criminal. Doesn't mean that they're the worst of society, but it's like if somebody said that, I like to talk a lot. That's not an insult. I'm a talker. I talk for a living.
Mhm.
So I can't take that personal. So yes, it's a moniker and it can be, kind of insulting, but it's a factually accurate statement. So that crime itself, it's Title 8 USC 1325, illegal entry. That's
Mm.
it. It's technically a crime under federal law. So that alone is enough to get you arrested. But on top of that, if you're an aggravated felon, that
Sure.
really, raises the ante. But I think what's happening is they got used to a certain level of permissiveness and chaos. And I think if, I surmise it simply like this: if your definition of freedom is anarchy and chaos, then law and order seems like fascism. And I think that's what a lot of people are kind of reacting to right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Valve 789 says you're grossly exaggerating criminal element of undocumented immigrants. This is what point I was going to actually get to. Aren't many people who wind up illegally living in the United States people who entered the United States legally once and overstayed a visa or overstayed their
Yeah,
welcome, so to speak, and found themselves with a whole life but just didn't have the paperwork or the
correct.
opportunity or the
Yeah.
money for the lawyer to put the paperwork through or whatever. Isn't that a huge part of it? Because in New York for a long time, meeting Irish people because it's full of Irish, I
New
met
York?
so
Really?
many people. Yeah. And
That's
no, it
strange.
isn't just the
That
Jewish.
seems that seems odd. I've never heard an Irishman in New
It's
York.
Irish people ordering Reuben sandwiches.
No, I'm
It's a
kidding.
beautiful mix. But
The
of
last time I
course,
went to McSorley's, I almost wanted to ask the guy for his passport because of how heavy
right.
his Irish accent was.
I just met so many that had
Yeah,
overstayed their visa. They came legally
yeah,
and they integrated and they worked and they contributed to the economy and to the system and so on. And they were welcomed by Irish Americans in so many ways. But then
yeah,
they didn't get their job visa. They were rejected. The bar they're working at said, no, we're not paying the
yeah.
3,000 to sponsor you or whatever. And they wound up kind of between a rock and a hard place. And next thing they overstay their visa. Now they've committed a crime, haven't they?
Yeah.
And now they're illegally in the United States, right?
So I agree with absolutely. I mean, I would never say that the majority of the people that are here illegally are hardened criminals. That's absolutely not true. In fact, it's actually a smaller portion of the population in the illegal immigrant population that commits crimes than our own citizens.
Right.
But that being said, I think what people are reacting to is sometimes the crime itself has an additional layer of symbolism that people are even more shocked by. So again, a school shooting is a perfect example of that. When you have a murder in, in some large city where somebody kills a bunch of people and that person is caught, it doesn't have the same visceral effect as when that same type of person kills 14 kids. It's why terrorism works, right? Because it has a symbolic kind of unnerving element to it.
Yeah.
And I think in this case, what people are reacting to is, if your child is killed, obviously it's a tragedy if your child is killed by a violent criminal. But the compounding effect of the fact that that person has been arrested, deported, arrested, deported, arrested, deported, or he was in custody and was not deported because he was in a sanctuary city, it just adds that additional kind of emotional sting to it, and I think
Right.
that's what people are so repulsed by and revolting against when it comes to this, so it's definitely an emotional element to it, yes.
Service and Adventure says, what is the policy in Italy? What happens if you enter illegally? What happens if you overstay your welcome? Well, there's a few things to answer here. First of all, immigration policy is roughly the same around most of the modern industrialized world. I'll give you a great example. Of course, being an Irish guy going to the United States, I know lots of people are questioned at the airport and rejected. And I know people in New York who overstayed their visa, but then they got married and then they got naturalization, blah, blah, blah. There's all of these different cases. So you always hear about them in the United States, but the truth is it's everywhere. And I'll give you a great example. I was in Aruba and I needed to fly back to, this is back in 2006. I needed to fly back to New York to pick up things to go back before going back to Dublin and renew my visa was already renewed. I just needed it stamped to my passport. And I was rejected because you're supposed to go back through, it's technicality, like with many things. And my girlfriend at the time was from Colorado. And she came with me. I was like, I can't fly back to the States. I've got to go back through Europe. And then I'll come back on the new visa. And she came with me. She was like, oh, I'm coming with you, you know. I'm like, okay, great. So we decided to make a holiday of it in Europe. I was like, while we're at it, let's go. We're flying into Amsterdam. It's the only flight we can get out of Aruba because it's a Dutch colony. So we're flying to Amsterdam. Let's go around Amsterdam. I've got some friends there, friends of friends. Excuse me. Let's go to Italy, and then I'll go through Dublin and pick up my newly renewed visa. I bought an open ticket for the two of us. There was no return. And what you do when you fly into another country is you need a return ticket because you have to show intent to leave. It's okay to visit, but you've got to be leaving. And it was a huge eye opener or reminder, I might say, that it happens in both directions. Because when we landed in Amsterdam, she was surrounded. We walked out, we got off the plane, and all these police came and surrounded her. And I'm like, excuse me. And they're like, stand back, sir. And I was like, oh, shit. And they're like, what are you doing here? Why do you only have one way? Do you have intention of moving to Europe illegally, blah, blah, blah? And she was terrified. Yeah. And I explained, we had to explain the situation that happened and so on. And no, we're leaving, we're going back. And in the end, they accepted it. But it happens in all directions. Now, for that person who asked, Service and Adventures, who asked that question, I'm from Ireland and we're part of the European Union. So when you're part of the EU, you can travel very easily between countries. You can go to France and live in France if you want. You can live in Denmark. You can live in Spain and Portugal. It used to be the United Kingdom, but those guys had a brilliant idea of leaving the whole system. But it's a beautiful system where we can just go and work and live for as long as we want in all these other countries. It's a bit like states in the United States. So that's how it works. But you keep hearing the conversation happen about the United States for many reasons. A lot of people want to move there because of job opportunities. Now, Ireland is facing that same problem. We used to be a country where people emigrated from because there was no money or job opportunity, but it was great education. So we had an immigration problem, and now we have an immigration problem because now we're rich and everybody wants to move to a rich country. It's the other side of that coin.
It's a good problem to have too.
It's a good problem to have. Yeah, the Irish, certain Irish are complaining, but I'm like, guys, don't you remember 1980s? You know, when there was nothing to do and no jobs anywhere, and your only hope of getting any sort of money at all is to get on a boat and go over to England, start working in an Irish bar in London or in Liverpool, or getting on a plane to New York. It was your only option. Now we have the opposite problem. So that's how it works. Essentially, it's not too different. Policies aren't too different now. Of course, there's been a huge influx of refugees, Syrians, and so on. And they do have asylum here in Italy, and the asylum rules across Europe are fairly laxed. We're very welcoming as a people. But, you know, some people are complaining about it because they go to the train station and it's full of people who don't look like them anymore. And now, of course, recently, you know, essentially Italy since the Second World War has been pretty much a social democratic country, which to most Americans is basically communism or some sort of socialism. To you guys, if
you
Bernie
said
gets
that magic word, you said the magic word. You said the S word.
I did. If Bernie gets called a commie, Jesus Christ, like, this is definitely qualifies over here. But now, of course, they've voted in Meloni, Giorgia Meloni, who's part of the Fratelli d'Italia, which is a fascist movement, and she wants to close down the borders, and she wants to tighten up the borders, a la Trump, a la Le Pen in France, a la AFD in Germany. So
Yeah.
just to bring you guys up to speed
And
on
I think
that.
this is where compromise is important because if you're not willing to move from your position to the center, you're an extremist. And I don't think that's
Mm,
helpful in any situation, especially one like this. But again, I think that both extremes are bad in this case. And, you've got people on the right side arguing that we should just put machine gun turrets every 50 meters on the southern border and just kill
jeez.
people as they come across. And I always found it ironic about the refugee and asylum seekers that they should just be turned around. And my counterpoint to that is, well, then you want to be like China, because if you are a North Korean who fled North Korea and you're caught in China, you get sent back to North Korea to be executed. So if that's your position as a red-blooded American for freedom and liberty, that seems to be strange. But again, equally as irrational is the other side where everybody just says, borders are a social construct and immigration is fluid and we can just all come and go as we please. That's obviously insanity too. It's just in the wrong direction. But if you're not willing to kind of meet somewhere in the middle and come up with a sane policy where people are vetted and people are allowed in based on specific criteria. And we have all those criteria in place. This is another common misconception when I always hear people say, America's immigration system is broken. It's not broken. The rules are there. And what it is it's misunderstood, neglected, and kind of ignored depending on who's in charge. And when other people come in charge and they start enforcing those rules, then it feels like fascism is taking over because now you have law and order. So for people that don't like America's immigration laws, there's a process to change that. You vote people in and out of office who align with you ideologically, and you petition those lawmakers to change those laws because obviously laws can become outdated and archaic and inefficient. But again, to use another analogy, if the speed limit in your town is 50 miles an hour in a specific zone and you think that that's too low, and a police officer pulls you over, screaming at the cop on the side of the road is not the solution. He's not the
Right.
one that sets the speed limit. So you need to go to your city hall and come up with a reasonable explanation for why it should be 65.
Yeah.
And, the slippery slope that I'm concerned with is where people think that it's okay for law enforcement officials to pick and choose which laws they're going to enforce and which laws they're going to ignore. That's the decay of a democracy. That's how you become a third world country and a corrupt banana republic. When the police officer, based on his own intuition and morals, gets to pick which laws he's going to enforce and which laws he's going to look the other way. There's obviously discretion there, but we want law enforcement officials held to a standard where they're expected to enforce the laws. And if we don't like the laws, that we need to change those laws, not to badger, law enforcement officers and to talk about defunding the police and defunding ICE and getting rid of immigration entirely because we don't like the immigration policies.
Where do you stand on the birthright changes? I mean, isn't that constitution? Isn't that part of
Mm,
your constitution that if someone is
yeah.
born on the land, so
There are
they're
exceptions
rewriting?
to it. Yeah. It
Okay.
is in the 14th Amendment. There's the concept
Yeah.
of jus soli and jus sanguinis, which is, law of the land and law of blood.
Right.
Um, but again, if an ambassador from, the Netherlands comes to the US and has a child in the US, that child is not automatically a citizen. So I
Hmm.
think what they're trying to do is they're trying to expand those kind of regulations and include people that are here illegally. Um, as it stands now, the way the law is interpreted, that if you enter the United States and you live here and you don't have status, it's kind of a loophole around that diplomatic status that you would have if you were an ambassador, for example.
Hmm.
So it's a gray area. It's kind of a blind spot in the law that's being exploited. I mean, I don't know again how you would undo that. I think that would be a Supreme Court case that would probably have to go all the way up to the Supreme Court. Somebody would have to present it, or it would have to be an amendment to the Constitution for that to happen. I don't think Trump is, or any president for that matter, has the ability to change that through executive action. Um, That's a difficult discussion. I don't
I have
know. I
I
don't
have a
really know
friend
how
in
I
New
feel
York. I
about
did a
that.
lot of work with him for years. Jewish guy in New York, and
Now you're
his
talking.
now you're talking. Now he went down. His girlfriend or wife, I can't remember what she was at the time, was from Mexico, and he'd go down and see her and spend a lot of time in Mexico, and then come back up to the city and work. And then they decided to have a baby, and he went down and picked her up and walked her over the border to
Smart,
have the baby
smart.
in some town, some hospital that was just over the border, so that
Yeah,
his child,
yep,
who he gave a beautiful Jewish name and everything, and been loved and accepted by the whole Jewish family in New York,
that's right.
but but is, so that the baby is American and comes under United States
Yeah.
law, etc., etc.
Welcome to the world, Moisha.
Right.
You are
So,
sheltering enemies of the state underneath your floorboards, are you not?
how you not?
Monsieur
Uh,
l'Appetit.
Monsieur l'appetit.
Monsieur l'Appetit. Yeah,
Your delicious milk.
that's what people do. They figure out the system. I mean, there's WhatsApp groups about this. Hey, cross
Yeah.
here, don't cross in Texas. We used to have
Ooh.
these enforcement operations where, Texas, for example, was kind of the Wild West. And then
Are you
Texas,
part of these? Oh, sorry, I have to stop. Are you part of these? Do you have to infiltrate
no,
these WhatsApp groups?
no, 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 no.
Pretend
These
you're
are
part of it?
no, no, no. This is
Oh,
somebody else has done that before, but
okay.
they find, and some of these people will openly tell you. There was in the 1980s. There was actually this is kind of a funny side anecdote, but in the 1980s and 90s, the flood of immigrants and illegal and legal was through California. And if you've ever been to California and you drive near the border, there's a sign. It's a yellow sign with people running across the road. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Your brother's probably seen that, or if you've
Yeah.
been out to California. And that was a sign that was put out because immigrants would be running across the highway from Tijuana into San Diego, and they were trying to
Like
warn.
deer.
Yeah, and they were trying to warn people, hey, mind the immigrants running across the highway. And
Ooh.
so what was happening was that they were calling these bonsai charges where they would just, rush the border, and there's only a certain number of border patrol agents that can kind of grab, two and three here and there, and then the rest get through.
Yeah.
And that was the California approach, but in Texas was a lot more stringent. And my buddy who grew up in Texas said that if you talk back to a border patrol agent in Texas, you got your ass beat in the 90s. And so the Texas guys were wearing cowboy hats. And when they were detailing those guys out to California, they were kind of rough with some of the migrants. And word got out, hey, if you see a Border Patrol agent with a cowboy hat, that guy's from Texas. Don't fuck with that guy. And so
Right.
the California Border Patrol agents started wearing cowboy hats because they wanted to they wanted people to take them
Oh,
more
wow.
seriously, thinking that they were going to be, more enforcement minded. So there's that cat. It's basically a cat and mouse game that goes on, but they know, the people that are being smuggled, and especially the people that are doing the smuggling, they know where to go. They know what areas to exploit. They know decoys. They know how to, cross specific areas. And the other kind of nefarious thing that they do, these human smuggling organizations, is they utilize teenagers as foot guides, because they know that under American law, if you encounter a minor, that minor is not going to be held to the same legal standard as an adult. So under the age of 18 is a preferable guide, because even if that guide gets arrested, he's treated like a juvenile and he's not going to be
Mm.
criminally prosecuted. Whereas if an adult gets caught smuggling people into the country, they're criminally prosecuted, not just administratively or removed. They're actually thrown in jail, depending on the jurisdiction. So these are sophisticated organizations. A lot of people just think that it's just people lining up on the border and running across. There is a method to this, that these are multi-billion-dollar industries at this point, to the point where they're actually using like little wristbands. Remember that scene in Sicario where he has the wristband
Yes.
and they
Yes.
find it and on that guy. So that's actually a legitimate thing. That came from the human smuggling organizations
Yeah,
because
the
that's
pink
how.
or multicolored wristband.
Yeah. So what these
Yeah.
what these human trafficking organizations do is they distribute those to basically indicate how much you paid and whether or not you're Mexican, Guatemalan, Honduran, or what they call exotic. So a special interest alien. So somebody from Russia or China or Sudan, so those guys are taken care of more because they pay more. And it can cost anywhere from $5,000 to cross to $20,000, $30,000 to cross, depending on how complicated the route is.
Ugh.
And the beautiful thing about that is if you cross and you get pushed back by Border Patrol, you got to pay again. So they
Mm.
tell you in Mexico, you get one shot, it's $5,000. You can't make it, guess what? Fuck you, pay me $5,000 again. And if you don't have the money, that's where the human trafficking element comes in because they say, you know what? Don't worry about it. You don't have the money now. When you get to New York, you're going to look up this guy and you're going to work in this shop. You're going to work in this hair salon, nail salon, whatever, and you're going to pay back your debt. So it's essentially indentured servitude. And that's what a
Yes.
lot of people don't understand is they think that if we just allowed people in and allowed them to stay, then, that's humanity. But it's really the opposite of humanity because the other argument, again, that I've heard from the left is, food prices will go up because the illegal migrants are doing this work that nobody wants to do. And
Right.
again, my takeaway from that is, so you're willing to exploit undocumented people.
You're happy to let the exploitation happen,
Yeah.
like as a benefit, because it keeps your wine
Essentially,
prices
yeah,
low.
you don't want to pay a lot for eggs, so you're willing to exploit modern form of slavery, essentially, an indentured servitude, a new serf class, so
I
you
think
don't have to
you're
pay more.
pushing a little hard there on that point, but I get what you're saying. Let me ask you
But
something
that's
from a more broad perspective.
sure.
Do Americans really see a day-to-day issue with this stuff? So let me explain what I mean. So in Ireland, we're having our own little version of this problem. There's only a very small section of the people who have an issue. All of a sudden, they're seeing brown and black people on the street, and some of these guys can't get a job, so they're just hanging around smoking weed. So they assume they're up to no good. And then if one of them does get up to no good, oh my God, it's a problem, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Irish are the fucking worst. Like, we'll beat your head in. Like, we're the worst. When I was back in Dublin, I was way more threatened by fellow Dubliners, just dickheads. It's been documented live on my channel. And I never had one issue with anybody, black or brown or Asian or anything, right? But what they're feeling is like they're being taken over and that their culture is at stake.
It's the Tucker effect.
Yeah, the Brits are doing the same. And people are, and certainly the fascists here, the hard right wing here in Italy, we're losing our identity as a people. Now, I'm pretty radical, as you know. So my attitude to Ireland is like, fuck it, let's do it. Like, that brown guy,
Have you seen the women from Brazil?
Like the women,
my God,
fucking hot,
we
right?
need that. Yeah,
we need a little we need some pigment. We don't tan on the beach, we stroke, right? So we need a little pigment in there. We might finally get good at soccer and learn how to play a drum kit properly or whatever. So it's I'm just being funny, but I kind of encourage it. I think it's kind of,
there's some truth to that.
I don't think we live in a world where people stop. I don't think that exists. I think we live in a world where people migrate, just like any other animal. It's part of our survival. So I have this kind of broad, weird approach to it. Do Americans, and by the way, I just want to add another thing. A lot of these Irish say these guys are like, get them out. They're always like, Ireland is full. That's one of their terms. Ireland is full. Now, last year I did 2 documentaries in Ireland, right? And I traveled the length and breadth of Ireland and documented it on my camera. Ireland is anything but full. There were places in Ireland where I didn't see anyone for miles and miles and miles and miles. I couldn't even see any trace of humanity, of modern civilization. It's anything but full. Are Americans really, is this kind of a drummed up fear, or is it really landing on people's doorsteps where they no longer feel at home in their own country?
I don't think that that's the American issue. I don't think multiculturalism is really as big of a problem. Now, again, if you're on
But
Twitter or if you're
isn't it,
on,
sorry to stop you, but
yeah,
isn't America multicultural? Isn't that the whole
absolutely,
point?
and that's what I think. I don't think most Americans are against immigration. I don't think. Again, this is where the term immigration, migrant, immigrant, kind of just gets conflated and absorbed into all these different things. And I think it's important to separate, legal immigration, legitimate asylum refugee, and then illegal immigration. And then those three things are not the same. And I think that that term migrant kind of just obfuscates a lot of the nuance that's in those things. I
Right.
think most Americans reasonably understand. They're compassionate people for the most part. I think, again, if you listen to the extremists, obviously that's not the case. But
No.
I don't think most Americans are going to say, that a poverty-stricken person who comes here, who's willing to work, who isn't a criminal, who doesn't have a criminal record and has no intention of committing crimes, should be sent back to starve and die. I don't think that's the case. But I think that the problem is if you go to places like Arizona and Texas and you talk to the local landowners there and you talk to the local population in those border communities, they see it from a different lens because they see the problem up close and personal, and they see the criminal element come through. They see the chaos and disorganization. They see that the system is overwhelmed because there's so many people coming through unchecked, and they're obviously concerned. And I think that people that are further removed geographically and emotionally and practically from that should realize that, we're all living on the border. It's just that some of us haven't realized it yet. And this was happening when they were busing people to New York and Chicago and just dropping them off. All of a sudden, a lot of those very liberal minded people were like, whoa, my kids can't go to school today because my school's been converted to a shelter. What the hell's that about? So I think it's easy to be charitable with other people's resources in this case. And if you talk to some of these people on the border, many of whom are actually of Latin Hispanic descent, whose grandparents came here from Mexico and El Salvador. Again, some of the staunchest anti-immigrant people I've met were Hispanic origin Border Patrol agents.
Dude, I
They
was just in
hate
Miami.
yeah, they hate illegal immigrants more than, and again, all the
Yeah.
white people that I worked with are kind of like, oh, it's a difficult job and it's a thankless
Right.
job. And this guy, and
And
you
they're
would
like,
hear some
fuck that.
conversation. Yeah, they're like, fuck these wets. And you're like, what? You can't say that, And that's just the way that they talk. So to them, it's even more of an issue and even more of a focal point. Again, Trump, based on the statistic that I saw, Trump lost one demographic in this election, and that was white men. He got fewer votes from white men in 2024 than he did in 2016. He gained
Wow.
Latino votes, he gained
Yeah.
black votes,
Yeah.
he pretty much, ran the table. So
Right.
I don't think that, again, this is where if the Democrats want to win another election, they need to stop focusing on, Halloween costumes and trigger warnings, and they need to get back to being the Democrats of the 90s. And if you go back and listen to Obama and Clinton talk about immigration, they sound like Republicans today because the left has gone so far to appease activists on their side that they're not focused on the majority of the country. I think majority of Americans, obviously I'm speaking for a lot of people, are empathetic people. They understand the plight and they're willing to help, but it has to be a controlled thing that, the population is not overwhelmed in the process, and that these people are actually assimilating and they have, language programs,
Well, this
job
is what I'm
programs.
asking.
Yeah.
Are you being overwhelmed? Is America actually really being overwhelmed?
I think
Because
America, no, not as an entire country. No, I mean, there's places you go in Omaha, Nebraska, obviously that's not an issue. But if you go along the majority of the southern border from San Diego, California to Brownsville, Texas, you're going to
Mhm.
see chaos. I'm going to Texas next week,
Yeah.
and I talk to people that are still there, and they finally feel like they can breathe a sigh of relief and they're not working 16-hour days processing thousands and thousands and thousands of people and then just releasing them into the country. So I think we caught it at the right time, but I don't know where we would be if Kamala Harris was reelected for another 4 years and those policies continued. Again, for the record,
Kamala.
Kamala, excuse me.
Sorry,
Yeah.
it's all right.
And before anybody accuses me of one political ideology or another, just to inoculate everybody, I'm not I vote based on issues that I think are important. I voted for Republicans. I voted for Democrats. I kind of consider myself a centrist, but leaning right on certain things and leaning very left on social issues. So I
Mhm.
don't put myself in that box. I'm not a MAGA guy. I agree with some of Trump's policies. I disagree with some, and I definitely disagree with his presentation. But I think a
Sure.
lot of the stuff he's talking about is fairly common sense.
That's one of the reasons you're on the show. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't need another person to just like bounce the ball back nice and
Yeah.
soft. We both agree
Yeah.
with each other.
And I'm not an
Um,
asshole about it.
right. I mean, anyway, like what I'm trying to get at is, I don't know. I can't help but feel that a lot of it is fabricated out of out of angst and prejudice, because there are so many things to look at, like I'm doing with Ireland. Look at the
Yeah.
bright side of it. Like you say, some little town in Omaha and some little Palestinian family move into town, and they don't look the same. They don't speak the same language, but you know what? They make some great food.
Yeah.
Why don't you let them open a little food store in the corner? You might like it. In fact, it
Yes.
might be better food than any
It's
of you
going to be
guys
better
could.
than that Burger King.
Right.
Yeah.
And
No, and I don't think
when
that
you're
that's
in New York,
contentious.
when you're in New York for years, that's the thing. Like, you see all the cultures of all of the world, and you can eat any food you want. And if you fancy girls who look Indian, you can go on a date with a girl who looks Indian or is Indian or whatever. Or if you fancy this and that and so on, if you have the yellow fever, sorry to use that phrase, right? You
It's
can
late.
get yourself a date. It's late, sorry.
Yeah.
It's multiculturalism kind of in its best form, or one of its best forms
Yeah.
that I've ever seen in my life. And I'll never forget, traveling to Boston with the band and going, this is interesting. Where are the black people? Like, everyone's white and pudgy, like everywhere I looked. It was a shock for me coming out of New
Yeah.
York that's so multicultural. And I'm just wondering, like, is it really being overrun? Is
No.
America as we know it being suffocated, or
Yeah.
is it actually doing well and improving because of these things? Yes,
Yeah.
certain issues. I'll always hear from people going, that person came to this country and they got free healthcare, and I'm paying tens of thousands of dollars for my healthcare, so get them out. And I'm always saying, like, well, no, the problem is the fact that you're being made pay tens of thousands of dollars for your healthcare.
Yeah.
That's the person you should be angry at, not at the family who escaped some poverty or war-torn country and they're being helped by the state with their healthcare. You're pointing at the wrong person. You're both poor. You're
Yeah.
both poor. Your enemy isn't that family down the
Yeah.
street who also are struggling to pay their bills. Your enemy is the people who are making the bills. You're pointing your anger in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
I
would agree with that.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I think there's a lot of hysteria on one side and a lot of hyperbole overcorrection on the other side. And that's again why the centrist view is typically the best, because if you're not willing to compromise at all from your position, well, then you're an extremist, right? And there's no point in trying to fix the problem because you have to meet in the middle. I don't think America is being completely overrun and changed, but I think it is a significant enough problem that we are noticing it early. And I think that the rational approach is to address it before it gets out of hand. But again, I do want to make the distinction between multiculturalism and open arms and, give us your poor, your huddled masses
Right.
versus people just having a free for all because the border's open, no one's getting arrested. And that's not the same. I don't see that parallel. To me, I think orderly, organized, rational immigration policies should consider humanitarian aspects as well as security risks, and that's where we get to make that decision. And the absence of that does produce chaos. And if enough people, again, in those border states, you're talking about large communities, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, California. And if enough of that gets covered and it kind of escalates in the zeitgeist for the society, then a lot of people will vote based on those issues, not because it's impacting them in the moment, but because they're afraid that it will impact them eventually. And that's what I think the reactionary kind of, let's just stop the flow right now and let's fix this. So, but again, I always try to explain to people that, a nation's immigration policy and a nation's border security policy is something that the nation gets to decide. And we all do this on an individual basis. Who you allow into your home is your immigration policy. And if you have to tell them to leave or you don't open the door, well, that's your border security policy. And it doesn't make you a bigot or a racist if your friend calls you and says, "Hey, can I crash on your couch for a couple days?" And you go, "No, I'm sorry. My wife is sick. My kid's sick. It's not a good time." You get to make that decision. And if somebody knocks on your door and says, "Hello, I'm here petitioning for such and such," you get to do a threat assessment. You get to see, does this person make sense? Maybe something's wrong. Maybe I don't want to let this person into my house with my wife and kids. And so those concepts don't become racist and xenophobic and bigoted when you extrapolate them to a population, and a nation decides to have those same ethics and their value system implemented on a national scale. I think there's room for more humanity in certain cases, but I also think that humanity can't come at the expense of the security of the host population. And I think that's what people felt betrayed, because a lot of the extreme views on the right are only focused on the American population, while a lot of the extreme views on the left were focused only on the immigrant population. And that's a losing proposition, because if the people you're asking to put you into power, you're telling them you don't care about their well-being, they're not going to vote for you. And I think more than anything, that's what swung the election for Trump. It's not that people love Trump. I think secretly, deep down, a lot of people that voted for him, they agree that he's crass and he's brash.
Yeah, they just want him to lock the doors for a minute.
But they just don't want again, it's like if you have a hole in your roof and you have somebody come over and they're kind of an asshole, but they're a good carpenter and they're telling you that they need to fix the roof. And then you have another person that comes in and they're an interior decorator and they say, "Well, you're lucky to even have a house. And that roof, that hole isn't so bad. When it's not raining, there's no problem. What's the issue?" You're like, "You know what? I'm going with that guy." I don't like him. He's kind of a dick, but he's addressing the problem, and he seems to at least tell me that he knows what he's doing. Now, whether or not he turns out to be a good carpenter, that is yet to be determined.
Yeah. About DEI.
Oh boy!
Because this,
you really want to light some shit on fire.
Shit. Fuck, man. I'm so sorry. We don't have to talk about it long.
Eddie, get your wallet ready.
It's like, okay, so, well, whatever. Trump went out last night. I mean, that infuriated me so much.
Yeah, very tasteless.
Yeah, it was super tasteless. Not in that moment. Like, don't do that. You're a leader. Bring people together. Instill people's confidence in the aviation industry, by the way, while you're at it, because people see a crash of any sort and they cancel their travel plans and so on, because people are already nervous flyers. Most people are in some way or another, either mild or extreme white knuckle flyers. And, especially after the flight I did last year, people need to be reminded of the extreme lengths that these men and women go to make everyone safe and to make that whole mode of transportation safe. But instead of mentioning any of this, it's DEI hires with no information whatsoever, nothing to back it up. Now it's looking a bit more like he was perhaps trying to deflect, because I have a timeline of recent events here that should be noted that on January 20th, Trump fired the FAA director. The next day, he freezes all ATC hiring air traffic controllers. The next day, he disbands the Aviation Safety Advisory Committee. A few days later, he sends a retirement, they call it ransom here because I'm reading from a leftist thing, ransom letter to existing FAA employees because they're part of the federal government, I assume. And then, of course, there's the first American mid-air collision in 16 years with 67 fatalities. The optics are not good. I'm not saying it's his fault directly, but the optics are not good. What a brilliant moment to come out and say it's all to do with DEI. Now, listen, I can say lots of bad things about America, as you fucking well know. I will do it for any country. Don't come fucking banging your America's the greatest drum in my house, because I'll fucking take you down and give you lots of facts and so on. And just say, calm down. It's a beautiful country with lovely people, but don't give me any of this horse shit. There's a lot of other great places in the world, etc., etc. But I also feel protective of the men and women of the military who, work hard and to make things safe in the United States and around the world, if that's the case. The idea that whoever was piloting that Black Hawk helicopter was put behind those controls, not because they're qualified, not because they're capable and competent, but because they're Black, or because they're a woman, or because they're Asian, or whatever, or Jewish, or whatever they may be, is absurd to me, and it's an extreme disrespect for those who are in command. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think it's totally crass and tasteless. And this is what I mean by, if you can't criticize Trump for that, you're in a cult.
Yeah.
If you can't point out the lack of tact and statesman-like behavior in that moment, where even if you believe that that's true, in fact, even if you got a briefing that was a DEI hire that was piloting that chopper, there's still other people involved. There's still families of the passengers. There's still the other two crewmen in the helicopter. It's just an incredibly tasteless moment of, either making it about himself or pushing again. Well, this is the result of my predecessor. This is why this type of thing happens. Again, this is what he lacks, is that in that moment, he just cannot help himself. He cannot pause the troll behavior and just be a president, and just go out there and give that, condolence speech and say all the right things and take the questions and just do the statesman-like thing of rebuffing, the investigation's ongoing. We're not sure what the cause is. We're going to continue looking into this, blah, blah, blah. Just say those things. It's like in that moment, if your friend dies of lung cancer and you call the person and they go, yeah, he passed away. You don't go, well, serves him right. That idiot shouldn't have been smoking.
Right.
Even if that is the reason, like, what kind of thing is that to say to a person? So yeah, I agree with it. And by the way, if Eddie's watching, I'm just busting your balls, man.
No, I mean, for those on the left who think this could be some sort of breaking point for the right, I don't think it's gonna be. I don't think they're gonna. I don't think people. You're right. It's a cult. It's you can't be. No matter what he does, he can't do anything wrong. I think it was extremely wrong. But also, I think there could be something sinister behind it, as in, shit, like the decisions you just made could have contributed to that.
Absolutely. It's possible.
Maybe possible. And what are we going to do? You better bring up something else that makes people's blood boil. And the DEI thing has been in the air now for a few years, at least. This idea that people are being hired. I mean, again, I look at it a different way. You're expanding the pool. If you're only hiring white men, aren't you missing out on possible other talent that's around there? Statistically, the people who have benefited the most out of DEI are white women. They're just white. They're the wives of those men. They've actually benefited the most from DEI because it expands the pool and it encourages the seek for talent, regardless of what you look like or what gender you are or whatever. But the way it's being framed for people is that they're going to hire people who are not qualified for the job just because they need to meet a certain quota of black people who are hired that year or whatever. And therefore, they're putting people's lives in jeopardy because someone got behind the controls of this thing who didn't know what they were doing. That's implying that all these people above that person don't know what they're doing either. And they're like, oh yeah, let that woman just fly the plane. She's shit, but we had to hire her because of DEI, because of Biden. We had to hire her, but let her fly the thing anyway. Like, that's,
I don't know.
That's insane
I mean,
to me.
I can't speak. I mean, I'm not in the military currently. I can't speak for it. What, you know,
You've
and
been
again,
in Black Hawks.
I've been in Blackhawks, and I've flown with male pilots and female pilots, and I just always assumed that, you know, if that person is sitting in that left seat, you know, they know what they're doing. They're there for a reason.
Right.
Again, I think this is where the emotional element comes in, because there was definitely a push for getting more diversity into specific fields and industries. And whether or not on the back end the standards were being changed or manipulated to some extent, they may not be. But I think what caused people to question it is now they look at the pilot and they see that they're not a white man, and they go, well, are you here because of merit, or are you here because of your skin color? And now that doubt sets in, and that's, I think, the toxic element of it. I think there's certain industries where diversity is absolutely a good thing. And I think that there's other industries where your race, your gender, your skin color, your sexual orientation should absolutely not be even on the table. It shouldn't even be a question. So the DEI policies that were pushed out to the military under the previous administrations were, I think, surface level for the most part. I think it was just like those repetitive emails that you would get about, you know, this month is Pacific Islander month, and this month is Black History Month, and this Black is Jewish American History Month. I think it was all a lot of that surface marketing stuff. But I think in the deep recesses of the military where it mattered, for example, pilots, I think that the standards were still maintained, because, again, you're not going to put, unless, I mean, I could be wrong where the entire military command completely lost its mind and they all just said, we'll capitulate and just put females and whoever, as long as we meet this quota. We can't have these white guys flying all the helicopters. But short of that happening, I think the standards were still maintained for those pilots. The proficiency levels are still maintained. And I think that goes for, again, the majority of the military, especially in some of those more critical roles, you know, special operations, all that stuff. I think it's a little bit of an overreaction to say that DEI is to blame for this stuff. Now, if you take the corporate world, that's probably more of a thing where corporations were pressured, you know, to hire more Black and more lesbian and gay people because they didn't have that talent pool.
Yeah, they got a staff of 600 people in their offices.
Yeah, but the consequences of, you know, doing that for, you know, Progressive Insurance is not the same as doing that for the 29th Air Wing for the Army. I think that's
the point I'm trying to get at. I feel like it's extremely disrespectful. I have to answer these because these are super chats. AP, please. I don't think this one is very nice. John gaslighting about what is and isn't fascism, while Elon sending his heart out to Trump setting up camps. I didn't pay enough to call you. Okay, so we have a lovely. Okay, I'll just say
AP's not happy.
AP is not happy. Mappy Gay isn't happy, by the way.
All right. Well,
Joe LaFaro, $10 for rational, engaging discourse and polarizing topic. Bravo to both of you. Thank you.
Joe's happy, so that cancels out AP's unhappiness.
That cancels the other because they were both the same amount of money. So thank you.
We're back in the center.
Yeah. Where we like to be.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, that's another thing with Elon. Like, I don't know. I mean, short of reading his mind, or, you know, I wouldn't be able to tell you definitively one way or another. Did it look like a Nazi salute? Yes, it did. It absolutely looked like a Nazi salute. You know,
yes.
It's the thing I said to you about if I show you my middle finger and go, look, I cut myself and I'm flipping you off. It looks like I'm flipping you off. It may not be my intention, but that's the gesture that it looks like.
Stephen Fry was on, a great comedian and actor from Britain, was on a podcast today, and he said Elon Musk is not a Nazi. Nazis make really good cars. It was just a joke.
And amazing uniforms too. Those uniforms were sharp. Say
I
what
don't.
you
I
want.
don't think the guy is. I just think he has. Yeah, he has fascist sympathies, because it wasn't even the salute. I mean, the salute was pretty rough, but it was what he said after that. He said, "You've guaranteed preservation of the civilization," or something like that along those lines,
Yeah.
which sounds like the 14 words from because I know fuckers over here who believe in all of that shit. Everybody knows that I know those guys. They
Yeah.
think that I believe what they think. No, I don't. But I do. I have interacted with some of these guys, and this is the kind of stuff they talk about. They talk about the evolution of civilization. They believe
Yeah.
that the white man is the path to modernization of civil and the preservation of civilization. That's what the whole thing is about. Never mind the salutes. Think
Yeah.
about the ethics, the ideas that they have. So that was the really disturbing thing. He does all of this stuff and he does these gestures, and then he says, "You have guaranteed the preservation of civilization." I'm like, holy shit! This stuff, needs some Wagner.
That's the thing. I want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, especially for a public, gaffe or a misstep, or if they misspeak. I mean, we're doing this live. If I say something stupid, or I misspeak, I can't go back and change it. It's on the internet forever.
Right.
But so I get the pressure that he was under, and who knows, it might have been an awkward gesture, and he, Elon being Elon is not going to apologize for it. He's going to double down and,
right.
Troll and, piss off the libs. That's kind of his thing. So when he was called out for it, he was like, oh, perfect. Here's an opportunity to, rage bait these guys. But yeah, and then going on the AFD, rally a day later probably didn't help the optics of that, because he immediately, pivoted to that political rally.
That wasn't good. Yeah, that wasn't a good look.
The optics aren't good.
Yeah, like to go straight onto the AFD screen in front of everyone. It looked like the scene from 1984 with that guy's face in front of all the masses. That's literally what it looked like.
Yeah, you might not be a Nazi, but you're doing a lot of Nazi shit. So maybe just consider the optics of that.
Well, one thing people need to understand, I've been fucking dying on this hill for a while, is that fascism and Nazism isn't the same. They're not quite the same thing. They're very related. They're very, very related. Any Nazi is definitely a fascist, but not all fascists are Nazis.
Absolutely.
And I think when you say the word fascist in the West, and particularly in the United States, they assume you mean Nazi. That isn't the same thing. I'm not saying I like either, but it's not quite the same thing. It was the National Socialist movement that kind of extended its reach beyond fascism. And but the fascists are still very much a presence around the world, certainly. And, they come up with all sorts of, they have all sorts of talking points and so on. And I've heard them, I usually just sit there and drink my beer and shut up, but I've heard them, and this really rings true for them. They don't care about the Holocaust and all that. That's not a thing they're concerned about. They're concerned about, conversations are usually about like banks controlling currencies and
when they say banks,
once they enter banks, then it's gone. But,
and this fucking weather, the weather, the banks,
the banks. We know exactly what you're getting at. But just to hear that kind of idea. My thing with Musk is like, don't waste billions going to an arid, freezing planet that was possibly abandoned by a civilization 1 billion years ago. Try to terraform some freezing cold planet in our solar system. Use your money to help people who are here on this planet, where you can actually breathe oxygen and so on. Your ideas are that of a child, he sounds childish to me.
Yeah, I think Musk is slowly becoming the Howard Hughes of our generation.
Well, I mean, if that's a compliment, because Howard Hughes
not towards his later years, he kind of lost his mind.
Sure,
that's what I mean. Like, he was, again, and I think two things can be true at the same time. I think Elon Musk is obviously a brilliant entrepreneur and, a probably a once in a lifetime intellect when it comes to specific things and how his work ethic and the way that he, obviously bought companies, built companies, and his success. But he can also be kind of an asshole. Those two things can exist in the same space. And to me, the biggest problem with these personalities in politics, I've said this before, I like my politics boring. And I think
Hmm.
that very rarely does spectacle and substance occupy the same space within a
Right.
person.
Well,
And that's the
listen,
problem
if
that I
if
have
you
with a
ask
lot
me
of his
about
stuff.
Elon, I don't even think he has much of an intellect. I think he hires people with brilliant intellects.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
he's a business bully who buys out
Yeah.
companies and buffaloes people around. I
Yeah.
think that's his true skill. I
Yeah, I
think
think
there's
he's
I
intelligent. Yeah, and this is a perfect example of me misspeaking. I think he's intelligent, but I wouldn't consider him an intellectual. I don't think he's a deep
mm.
thinker about a lot of the things. He sees it, he has an opinion, and he just goes for it. He's that guy that will just not
Yeah, he's
stop.
got that. Yeah, he's
He's
got the
got that
tenacity.
tenacity. Yeah,
He hires 600 scientists and mathematicians to figure out
yeah,
how to send something into
yeah,
space.
yeah,
Travis Watts, who, by the way, has the no date sub on, so I put
mm,
mine back on,
yeah.
saying,
My man. There you
let's
go.
make a party out of it. John would be a great policy advisor at DC, in my opinion.
Well,
Thanks,
Travis,
Travis
thank
Watts.
you, but no, thank you.
You don't want that job,
No, I don't want that job. No, thank you.
man.
We covered a
It's
lot of ground today.
Yeah, we have. We can talk about lighter things if you want.
I mean, I might hop on with you and Dirk in a little bit. I'm gonna have to eventually go eat dinner here. Oh, and I also have to apologize for the TPG thing. So
Hmm.
he submitted the plea agreement, and I probably didn't clarify this to you because I had like 7 other things going on when I was texting you. So he initially had come to a plea agreement, but the way it works in the federal system is once the U.S. attorney and the client's attorney agree to the plea agreement, that has to go before the judge. So at sentencing, the judge can say this plea agreement is too lenient or this plea agreement is not severe enough, and I'm actually going to impose more time because this is kind of a sweetheart deal and I don't like it. Or the other way where he can say, well, this is way too much time, I'm going to reduce this down to, because that's why they give them those kind of minimum maximums.
Yeah.
So from what I understand, he did get 70 months because he was actually sentenced today. um,
Today. Yeah.
Today. So the judge concurred with the U.S. attorney and said 70 months is sufficient time,
How many
of
years is
which,
that?
oh God, don't ask me to do math right now. I
6
think
years?
5. Yeah, I think
5
I think he
years.
has to do, yeah, he has to do close to 80%, 85%. I think federal inmates, the last time I looked, they can
Right.
get up
So
up to
we weren't way off.
yeah, I think they can get up to 50 days a year reduced from their sentence.
Jocelyn
Um,
coming in with facts. Speaking of
there she is.
assholes,
Yeah,
TPG was sentenced today. 6 years plus pay restitution. How on earth
yeah,
is he going to pay 5 million? 5,600,000, by the way. It's over 5 million.
yeah.
Remember
I
back at the
mean,
start, it was like 3 million or something. I mean, how
my
do you view that on
prediction,
the inside, working for
well,
a dollar a day?
I don't think he's gonna do it on the inside. I think if he's smart, I hate to give the guy ideas, but I'm just gonna do it. What he's
Hmm.
gonna do is the Jordan Belfort route, where he gets out of prison and he approaches somebody who's willing to pick up the rights to his story, maybe write a book, come out with a documentary, or come out with a Netflix special, kind of chronicling his demise and his, contrition and all this stuff, and kind of close the loop on that. And then I think he's going to reemerge in one way, shape, or form back into social media. I think the guy is, again, the tenacity of just, I'm going to do it until I die. I think he has that. I think it's
Yeah.
good for the business world, but obviously he's lacking scruples and ethics. And I think he's just going to get out of prison and try to fix his life. And once he pays back that money, whatever is left, he's going to roll that into the next business idea, whether it's a scam or a legitimate business, he's probably going to start a podcast. You know, that's another
Yeah.
great way of making money and generating attention and views. And I think he's gonna. I don't think we've heard the last of TPG.
I agree. I don't think we have either. $5.5 million though is a lot to pay back.
That's
I
a
mean,
lot of
you
money.
really, yeah, you really need a really big contract for a book
Yeah,
or for a
a
podcast or
a
whatever
book
to
or a
make
Netflix deal. A Netflix deal might go a long way, but I don't know.
it might.
Unfortunately, I think the watch market's going to be kind of oversaturated by then, and maybe everybody will move on to something else, or we're going to be in World War III. So who knows? There's a silver lining. If World War III starts, we don't have to listen to TPG. There you
Well,
go.
he won't get out like in 2 years for good behavior or
No,
anything like
no,
that.
he'll do the majority of his time. I think they reduce if he behaves while he's in prison, he'll get 54 days taken off his sentence every year. So if
Okay.
he's got 70 months, subtract 54 days a year. So he might get out, 5 or 6 years somewhere in there, but he's going to do a significant amount of time. And again, I mean, if you're in a federal prison, 12 months is a lot.
Sure.
It's not a good thing. And when he gets out, he's a convicted felon. So, he's got some reduction in rights there. I think you know, and then he's got to start paying back that money. If he gets a legitimate job, his wages will be garnished a percentage. If he gets some lucrative book deal or some contract, that money is going to go to, the victims of his crimes. And I mean, I hate to say I'm glad it happened, but I think it needed to happen. I think the watch world kind of collectively lost its mind, and we were all in some weird delirium where we started to listen to people on YouTube living
Mm,
in, mansions and driving Ferraris, and nobody went, "How the fuck are you making that kind of money flipping Daytonas and APs?"
right.
And I mean, well, some people called it out, obviously, not
Some
not
people did.
everybody. Yeah, but a lot of people, again, this is what I mean. Like, a lot of people focused on the spectacle and didn't look at the substance and start kind of analyzing that, while other people were repulsed by the spectacle and started to draw attention to, hey, there's no substance here. So, if anything, I think that's the grift angle of most grifters. They want to show you the shiny object over here while they
Yes.
pick your pocket with the other hand.
It always astonishes me how impressed people get, particularly men. I think it's an Achilles heel for the males. They get so impressed by success and by money.
Yeah.
It's a crippling thing. It's I've made many criticisms of people in the watch world before, and a lot of comments can be something, of the ilk of, oh, you're just jealous because he's a millionaire and you're not, and things like this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, there's lots of millionaires in the world, multimillionaires or big gangsters. Like, is that what you're looking up to? But it doesn't seem to matter to a lot of people. They're just impressed when someone can make money and get ahead and buy
Mm.
that flashy car.
I think he had
And
the magic formula too. Like, he had all the pieces in place, for at least to attract his audience. And I think
mm,
that goes for a lot of YouTubers, like, Bark and Jack, Adrian has his little niche of, like, the explorer kind of guy. Brett
right.
Pierce has her niche of, like, kind of quirky, funny female in this weird watch space. You obviously have your place in space. Tim Wright has his. And I think what, Anthony zeroed in on is that, kind of that Bitcoin finance bro vibe. He's,
Yeah.
relatively young. He's got tattoos. He's wearing the baseball hat. He's not in a suit and tie. He's not
Right.
snobby. He's kind of like the rich guy living it up in LA. And I think a lot of people gravitated towards that and they wanted to emulate that. And it appeared that he was selling that image. So, yeah, he was he was no dummy. He wasn't. He was definitely calculating and fairly ruthless in his approach, and I think that ultimately he just overshot the mark, and that's what sank him.
Again, overreach can be the problem, can't it?
Yeah,
I think Archie Luxury, to his to compliment Archie on this, to his credit, is he said it the right way. He said the right thing. Sorry, I can't articulate myself right now for some reason. He said way back when shit was beginning to get a bit hairy for TPG, he went on and did one of his things, yelling at the camera, and
It's
but
pretty good archery
he
impression.
said, why don't you go and just like get a one bedroom apartment and sell a couple of watches a week and bring the temperature down and operate a good business, continue doing your videos, continue doing your stuff, but just sell a couple of watches a week out of your apartment and make an honest living
Yeah, build a
and just
business.
build a business in a kind of a somewhat honest way if possible. Instead, I think he had his sights set on like world domination or God knows what, and he had to do the flashy thing and
Yep.
rent the really expensive apartment that he, in the end, we all see now he couldn't afford. He
Yeah,
was
I think
spending.
he's the very victim, again, to really bring this conversation full circle. He's the very victim of what we talked about earlier, where people are in love with the result and they're not in
Right.
love with the process. So he saw the sexy results at the end of the road, but he didn't want to walk that road and, drudged through the YouTube space and, building an actual brand. He kind of just decided, well, if I can steal my way into this, I'll eventually get to the point where I make enough money where nobody's going to ask any questions and I'll be able to pay them back. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
ethics of the Ponzi scheme, and I think that's what he did. He saw that success, and then prominent YouTubers promoted him. Prominent watch dealer YouTubers decided that he was, the second coming. And that reinforced his, ethos of like, hey, this is working. I'm not going to
Yeah.
stop now. Now these guys are, I'm sitting here talking to
I'm
Paul
just going to
Thorpe.
keep swimming until I
Yeah,
reach
I
the
mean,
other
if you're
side.
sitting in the room with Paul Thorpe and, Roman Sharf in the watch world, you've made it, and so
Yeah.
why backtrack from that? Because in his eyes, that was success. It wasn't, I'm going to build a brand, I'm going to build a storefront. Like the Teddy Baldessar route is what you're describing. He took his time. He kind of had that, mentality of just grinding, grinding, grinding. Started with a newsletter, then eventually, I mean, now the guy has a storefront and he's shooting YouTube videos with Kevin O'Leary, but that
Yes.
took years for him to get there.
Yeah, and
And
perhaps he had to borrow a lot of money to open that
absolutely.
store, and there's a little risk involved.
Yeah.
But it's the kind of risk that everybody has to take a little risk. If you want to get
Yeah.
ahead, you have to do a little bit of it for sure. And you're making a gamble there, and hopefully you'll come out well on the other side, and the damages won't be too bad. I feel like he was just like it was do or die, and
Yeah.
he was trying to swim to the other side that hopefully he could score some sort of big business deal at the other end, then pay everybody off. My thing with him is that if he got to that other side and he could pay everybody off, he still wouldn't do it. That's what I think. I think that he has a criminal nature in his mind. That's what I believe. Because you have to remember the guy was already in jail for some time for other things that he did. And he kind of had a second chance at life. We
Yeah.
already saw his second chance. If we see him again, it'll be a third. So it wasn't one fuck up. It was like a second time around where he could have said, you know what, I'm just going to be legit now, or I'm going to do my best and have an opportunity and let me make the best of it. Instead, he kind of he ran riot. He was kind of a maniac. You have to remember
legit can be
all the
boring.
cocaine and the hookers.
Yeah.
They're his words, not mine.
And
So,
legit can be boring. I think that's the other kind of
Right.
dynamic that I think he considered. He looked at people like Teddy Baldessar and said, that's boring.
That's
That's
boring.
not flashy. It's not boring. It's boring. It's not exciting. It's not sexy. It's not cool. It's not this highfalutin lifestyle.
Yeah.
And that's not me. I'm not going to put on a suit and a turtleneck and sit there and talk about, the difference between like a Pepsi from the 1970s and a Pepsi today and all the different, intricacies of it. He didn't want to do that part. He wanted he's a Wall Street guy. He's the Wall Street guy that got into watches. I think that's TPG in a nutshell. So we'll see where it goes. But who knows what prison's going to do to him? You know, he might get a
This is
PhD in criminal
this is
behavior.
yeah, this is the thing. Yeah. First of all, if and whenever he gets out, not if, but whenever he gets out, who knows what the watch world will look like or the social media world will look like then. I mean, this is a world that changes every 6
Yeah,
months. In 5 years, it could be a very, very different landscape. Also, what happens while he's inside? Because he's not just going to sit in a room. He's going to get to know
yeah.
people. He's going to get talking, and
Oh yeah,
stuff will begin to grow and fester on the inside there too. So who knows what sort of creature is going to come out of that?
yeah, yeah. You hope that he's reformed when he comes out, but unfortunately, prison doesn't really
Doesn't tend to
reform
do
people,
that,
especially with white collar crime. You know, because if
right?
you murdered somebody, odds are that that's, unless you're a serial killer, you know, that was a conflict that went too far, and you're not likely. If you murdered your wife, you're not likely to murder your wife again because that problem was solved. But
Yeah,
if you're a white collar fraud guy where your end state is to make as much money as possible, regardless of the route that you take, then when you come out, you're just looking for the next hustle. And that's
right.
what I think he's focused on. He's just going, okay, well, that watch thing didn't really work out. Let me see what else I can do. So I think
Dave 451, he could run for president.
he,
Very good point.
he doesn't have enough felonies. You need at least 30. He's only got 4 counts. I think he's slightly under the mark there. Yeah, those are rookie numbers.
Dirk is running way behind time. He was trying to do a
Oh,
live
okay.
stream on the streets and he's having technical issues. If you need to go and
Yeah.
have
Are you
dinner or
going over
make
there?
dinner, I'll go over there. Yeah, but I'm going to
Okay.
drag this out until
Okay.
he's live so I can bring the
Oh yeah.
crowd over and we can all
My wife
continue the
is my
chat.
wife is over here texting me and saying 15
Ah,
minute
okay.
warning. So I'm gonna
Well,
head out.
okay.
Good talking to you. And I'll catch up
Yeah,
with
man.
you either here on Dirk's or Tim's or on you know, Instagram and WhatsApp.
Thanks again for the insight, man. Fantastic.
Yeah,
As
thank you.
always.
Thanks for having me on, and thanks for everybody for sticking around and listening. And have a good night.
Cheers, buddy. What are your thoughts, guys? I got another super chat here. Alistair Brody, 5 British pounds. Great chat tonight, John. Amazing. Take all your overgrown infants away and build them a home. It's an interesting comment. Yeah, I mean, we covered a lot. You know, I have alternative ideas about that stuff. Immigration, I've spoken about it before. I think it's a good thing to look on the bright side, but hey, this is what's happening, and there's no stopping it at this point. So it's going to be wild. As I said before earlier in the show, I was just going to stick my head in the sand for 4 years, and you know what the fuck do I care? I'm over here in Italy anyway. It's not really going to affect me directly. I do have a B2 visa to the United States. I saw also he's looking to deport students who protested the ongoing massacre there in Gaza, calling them all sorts of names, and he wants to deport them. I wonder how far he's going to go with that. You know, be interesting. That's a First Amendment right removed right there in front of your eyes. So it's going to be a rough ride. It's going to be hard to ignore is what I'm trying to say. Like it's going to be fucking like, I'll do my best to just go la, 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 and think about other stuff, you know. AP, I thought I was going to have some drinks and relax, so she not drink and get angry. Yeah, sorry. I like to talk about current affairs. What are you going to do? If you don't like it, don't tune in on a Friday. Just watch out for my next video about my 5 favorite Rolexes or whatever. If that's your thing, that's fine. Some Fridays I do just talk about wine or whatever, but it's hard for me to ignore current affairs. And it's kind of cringe when people do. when you're on Instagram and someone is just posting photos of themselves pouting in the mirror during some crazy shit that's happening in the world, you really feel like it's tone deaf. But it's a decision a lot of people make just to stay out of it and not talk about it. And that's fine too. But my channel has never been like that. The channel has always extended over and beyond just the subject of watches. I think if you look at an episode when I go to some town, like Verona, for example, with the root beer, that was 3-4 years ago, popular video. I bring the root beer watch to Verona because of the color match, and it kind of fits in with the city. And I explore Verona and I go around and I'm eating strawberries and cream on the streets and, going into different cafes and museums and things like that. But I am talking about history, and I'm talking about the history of the city. And I think that these are the early signs of the channel kind of extending beyond just the watches and why we like wearing them. If you have an appreciation for art and history and music and so on, you're already halfway there, or more than halfway there. I think you're already interested in culture and history and things like that. So I think these things extend into that, but some people don't like it, especially the people who disagree. They're always the ones that pull out the card of like, why don't you stick to that subject? That was good. You either find it engaging or you don't. I'm pretty proud to say that I've had some very interesting guests on the channel, not least of which John. You wouldn't know him if I just stuck to watches. You wouldn't have heard all of that information if I just stuck to watches, would you? So, but I'm definitely in the wrong, not wrong, but tough waters, because a lot of the crowd, a lot of you guys are, they hear about watches, or you have very different persuasions than I do, so it's probably challenging at some points. What's going on in the chat, guys? Rufus, always great to hear John some perspective. Yeah, it's good. I myself and John disagree on many, many things, but it's, we kind of, I mean, I can't speak for him, but I definitely appreciate his outlook. How are you going to learn if you're not open to other outlooks? You just close yourself off. Hi, Trish C. Hey, it's good we get into this every so often. Yeah. Next week, I'll just talk about wine and watches. How about that? Just to give you guys a little, a breather. How's Dirk doing? Is he all right? He was going out to do a live thing, and he was trying to include me on it, but it requires different software settings, so he's having some trouble. And he's been asking me to try to fix it, but I can't really. Requires some heavy multitasking here. Can't really run a show at the same time. I'm coming to the end of this Partagás. It got very sweet there, like about a centimeter up. It turned into sugar. It's a weird thing about some cigars that most cigars toward the end, they start getting really, really nice. And you wish that would last forever, but then it's running out. So we were talking last week about reducing the collection a little bit, and most of you guys were saying that I should, if I were to reduce the collection way down, like get rid of everything except for 1 or 2 watches, what would they be? First of all, that can never technically happen because I just get sent watches all the time. So they wind up here in the house. So technically I own them. So, but I'm not counting those watches in most cases. Some of them I absolutely adore. I wind up loving, but I'm kind of thinking of my heavy hitters. That's really the luxury watches, the kind of the big pieces that I consider kind of part of the collection. And most of you were saying these two are the biggest contenders. So I got them ready here. It was down to those two. That'll be one of those two. If I were to be a one watch guy, it would be one of those two. It would either be the AP Chrono or the Gold Subby. Do you guys still feel that way? They're such different pieces as well. It's hard to even imagine letting go of either or. Then some people are like, oh, just stick with a Panerai. It suits you. That'll do. Or go back to the start and just wear the Seamaster 300M and be done with it. The way out is the way in. Wayne Gross says one watch guy is the no sub, the no date sub. You mean this thing? I'd probably get the 1-2 series if that were the case. Both beautiful, says DLWC. If I just kept those two, I suppose. Who am I kidding? Like, I don't know. I've always romanticized the idea of being a one watch guy, though. Just having that one watch that's you. That's just goes with you no matter what. Everywhere you go, it's always around, you know. Yeah, Patrick Cullen. You were kidding no one. Dean, give up all watches and become a priest. By the way, the watch in your avatar there, Dean, is one of my favorites. I've owned a lot of Seamaster 300Ms, and that's the one I can't quite get my hands on. People call that the Blake, right? What's his name? Robert Blake, is it? Edward Blake. What's his name? It's I think he was a boater or something, competitive racing on boats or something like that. I don't know who he is. But I always call it the Ray Donovan. You know, the TV show Ray Donovan with Liev Schreiber, because he always has that watch on. He has a collection of watches, the character. You see him going into his room in his big flashy house there in LA, and he earns a lot of money. And he has a drawer, you know, his room with all his shoes and his jackets, his suits and stuff. And he has a drawer and he opens it and there's a bunch of watches. That always seems to be the watch he has on. That's a great one. It's all black with the broad swords and the big indices. There's a lot of quartz versions of that going around on Chrono. But to get the automatic one in good condition is not cheap. I feel like they already know that that's like one to get your hands on. It's a beauty. I think Britt Pierce did a video on that one some time back and was saying the same thing. Robert Blake, there you are. Killed his wife, so Omega calls it the Peter Blake. Yeah, people call it the Peter Blake. There's John. One watch is freedom. Yeah, because he's a one watch guy. Do it. No date. No date sub. Is that the answer, guys? Is that the antidote? One no date sub. Because let's face it, like it's jewelry, isn't it? It's beautiful jewelry. You know, we're looking at our phones most of the time. We're stuck to our phones. See where Dirk is. This is kind of messy. I think he had ideas of going around New York, doing a walkabout. Explorer 1 AP. The 40 mil, maybe. A lot of people were saying the Explorer 2 last week because I had that on. Looks good on me. Travis, variety is the spice of life. You know, collecting can become a thing, though, you know. What did Archie say years ago? It's the hoarding and the possessing. It's all about the hoarding and the possessing. He does come out with some really amazing wisdom sometimes. Cuts through all the bullshit. Joe LaFaro, you shouldn't have become a one-watch guy unless you're bankrupt. Well, some people, you know, run into money problems and sell off their collection. That's another thing. That's a separate thing, I think. They run out of money, or something changes in their life. They lose their job or they get sick or something. And they have to start thinking about like getting rid of some of their pieces. What a great hobby to be in, that you can think about doing that, you know. So many things you can be into. You can't, that's not an option. You've wasted all that money. With the watches and with musical instruments and various other things, art, for example, you can think about if you've invested wisely, you can get out of those pieces and get your money back, or some of it. The SD4000, Andrew Braid. Well, if I was to go with an SD, I would do the SD43 because that's very me. I've had an SD4000. It wasn't mine. It was in my house for some time because there was a guy he was building his collection and finding amazing pieces. He's in Britain. So shipping them over there would have meant, you know, tariffs and stuff. So he was sending them to me and he was like, can you just hold on to them until I come through Venice? So I was kind of minding these beautiful collectible mint condition pieces for him. And he was like, I'll make videos if you want. You can wear them. I'm like, no, because it's got stickers and it's mint. I don't want to. You know, this is collector's item. This is collectible, man. I'm not going to bring this anywhere. I'm not going to put it on my wrist. Jesus. But it's a beautiful watch. The SD4K, as they call it, which is essentially a 5-digit sub that's kind of fatter and doesn't have a Cyclops. It's a good looking watch. For me, the SD43 is more suitable. Joe LaFaro is wearing his. It's a good watch. Big chunk of steel. I could always get crazy and just get myself a big James Cameron. Big 44 mil hockey puck. But I don't know. I don't know about that. Let me see where Dirk is. I might end up just ending the stream. It's been a while. We've been going on now for a while. And if any of you want to come over and join us with Dirk, we can do that. You can come over yourselves. Truthfully, if you just leave the window open, you don't touch YouTube, it'll actually just come on once we come on. But that could be 10 minutes, 15 minutes. By the way, what have I been drinking? Just some Barolo. Trying to take it easy. I'm probably going to smoke this Romeo Giulietta. It's a Romeo number 2. Good stuff. Nice. A centimeter ring gauge. Decent. Nice smooth smoke. J451, I do wish people would stop saying no date submariner. Listen, it's because the date is so popular. We, of course, know that the no date is just called the submariner. Everybody knows that. It's just because the date submariner became so popular, incredibly popular. But the no date, or the submariner, as you want me to call it, lies kind of by itself in the catalog. All the shenanigans happened with the date. All the two-tone and the white gold and the green bezel and the blah, blah, blah all happened over there. And next door, right next door, was the no date sub, who basically sat there going, I don't give a fuck what all you guys are doing. I'm an icon and I'm staying this way. Makes it extra fucking cool. I really hope they don't touch that. I really do. That's got to stay as it is. What do you guys think about what's going to happen with the new announcements? Because it's that time of year again. The Watches and Wonders is coming up. I had it was a moment the other night where I was thinking, I'm not going to go to Watches and Wonders because I want to boycott Switzerland for what they did to Ali from the Electronic Intifada. They arrested him. Loveliest guy in the world. Speaking up for the impoverished. But he was over, he was to do a lecture or something in Geneva, and they fucking arrested him on the streets. I was like, Jesus. That wasn't cool. They held him like for a couple of days in jail. Lovely, sweet guy. Calling him a terrorist, a terrorizer. Fucking bullshit. Would that happen to me, guys? Maybe. I don't think so. The red line on the SD43 is very nice. You can barely see it, honestly. You see it in the photos a lot, close-ups and stuff. But when you have it in the wrist, it's not like it really jumps out at you or anything. It's a detail, I think I'm going to wind things up, guys. And I'll see you over on Dirk's. I'm going to continue this cigar, maybe put on some dinner in the background. And have a chat with Dirk on the iBashers. We'll probably go on till it's coming up to 1 a.m. here. We'll probably go on till like 3 a.m. probably. So, as I said, if you just leave it open, you'll get there. If you want to click on it directly, let me put the link in the chat so you can get there and wait for him to go live. iBashers. Where is it? There's already a few people waiting over there. There you go. There you go. The link is in the chat. So you can click on that and just hang on and we'll be on. I'll continue smoking this cigar. I've still got plenty of wine left. Wasn't a big boozing evening anyway. Hope you enjoyed the chat. Thanks for keeping me company. And I'll have some new cool videos coming out in the coming days. Some nice stuff in the pipeline. Excuse me. So I'll see you over on iBashers with Dirk in probably 5 or 10 minutes, maybe a little longer. Be patient. Pour yourself another drink, light up another smoke. Change out your watch if that's your thing. And we'll have a chat over there. A little bit of fun. Thanks, guys. See you soon.